Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Your Grace, Mayor of Southwark, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. First of all, let me warmly welcome you to the representative office of Rossotrudnichestvo here in the United Kingdom in London. And it's a great honor for us to host this conference on such important subjects as the role of public diplomacy in fostering Russian-British relations. For our organization, this topic is the most actual this year as we all celebrate a historical event of the Russian-British cross-culture year. Absolutely outstanding events during the course of this year, both in Russia and UK, has already demonstrated the power of culture to enlighten, engage and inspire. But what also is important is the political, commercial and diplomatic ties that are being forged. Thank you very much for coming here today for an open dialogue. And as you can see from our program, we have many interesting topics to discuss and exchange thoughts on this subject. Let's have a fruitful discussion, and let me firstly introduce Minister-Counsellor of the Russian Embassy of the Russian Federation, Alexander Kramarenko, to say a couple of words, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you all in the name of the Russian Embassy. In fact, you are at the Russian Embassy because the Rossotrudnichestvo office is part of the embassy. I'd like to say that maybe not only weather-wise, but otherwise, politically, it's the right time to hold such a conference. Because since the tensions at the political level, you know, the differences between us and the West on Ukrainian crisis, they have led to some official freeze of official contacts and so on. I think we can survive that fine, but I think that there is no time to waste. And this is the perfect time for cultural events, for cultural exchanges, for people-to-people contacts, anything along civil society level. And that's why Olga Vlaklets knows very well how good it is to conduct cultural events. And this conference, I hope, will contribute to further strengthening of those links. Of course, we do appreciate always those British friends who have always had faith in Russia, be it at the time of the Soviet Union, back in the 19th century when Alexander Kramarenko was here, even at the time of the Crimean War. Of course, there were no such towering figures like Lord Holland at the time of the wars of Napoleon, who was the sole admirer of Napoleon in the British Parliament. But I know we did have a lot of friends all the time, and especially at the time of the Second World War, the 70th anniversary of victory, in which we are going to celebrate next May. I can share my impressions of the ceremonies we have been conducting since mid-July of presentation of the Ushakov medals to the British veterans of the Arctic convoys. And they are real friends. They are strong, although all of them are in their early 90s. There are people who are 101 years old or 100 years old. And they do say that the farther from the establishment, the more trust you have. That's why I think we are here a bit far from the establishment. And we have everything to have mutual trust and common cause. And the common cause is pretty simple. That's to live together, to enjoy our common history, our common endeavors of all types, and I think that this period of tensions between Russia and the West, we know that there need to be some collective decisions on the Western part to move forward. But I think that the situation as it evolves in Ukraine, it provides the right conditions for us to put this episode behind. Although some China has been broken, you know, you've got to live with that. But I think that the British, who are known for their common sense, if not rationality, they will let common sense prevail. Because, in fact, this is an artificial crisis for some reasons which I would say have nothing to do with the national interest of any Western country, with the national interest of Ukraine. That's why it won't last long. It's a folly, lunacy of a certain type, which human nature is prone to. That's why thank you very much for coming, for taking part in this conference, and especially I'd like to thank Ralph Gibson and the members of the Society for Cooperation in the Russian and Soviet Studies, who have organized the very representative delegation from St. Petersburg, our, let's say, our former capital, and I would say capital of choice for every Russian. Although I was born in Moscow, but there is so much linked in our history, in our culture, in our literature to St. Petersburg that we all of us have a special, let's say, soft spot for St. Petersburg. Thank you very much again, and I hope it will be a very fruitful discussion at this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, could you please turn the microphone up, because I know there are one or two people who are hard of hearing.
Yes, we'll put it on this level. Thank you very much, Minister-Counsellor. And now let me introduce Sergey Medvedev, Head of Department for Russian Centers of Science and Culture and Multilateral Cooperation with CIS members, just flown from Moscow for this conference. Please welcome Sergey Medvedev.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, дорогие друзья, I have an honor to present at this conference, and it's a great privilege for me, really, because it's actually 15th anniversary of the unveiling of the Soviet monument in London. So it's a 15th anniversary of my last visit to Britain, because I was in charge from the Russian side for the creating of this project. So my first words of appreciation to the administration of Southwark, District of London, and to London as the capital of the United Kingdom, because it was done this decision to put this monument into the British land forever. I should tell you that that story, it was 15 years ago, and there are some people who attended the ceremony was so intrigued as well, because it was also a time of a crisis. And this unveiling ceremony was on the 9th of May of 1999. So the high-ranking Russian delegation should arrive to London to participate in this unveiling ceremony. But on the 8th of May, it was an accident in Belgrade when the building of the Chinese embassy was bombed by Allied forces. That's why this visit was postponed, but the event, the ceremony was done, and it was handbraking from both sides. And British part was presented with two ministers, with the members of the royal family, and with its distinguished guests. It was very nice and very good example to my mind when the public diplomacy make much more for overcoming crises and for creating mutual understanding with people. 15 years passed. A few remembered about circumstances, but monument is still on the place, and it's a symbol of our friendship and so long centuries cooperation. I was a representative of my organization in Malta for 8 years, and it was a very good example of an experience for me, because I had a lot of British friends over there, and it was a great lesson for me as well. Probably some of you were over there and know about the cemetery, colonial cemetery, governmental cemetery at Garden of Rest in the south of Valletta on the Rockies. It was actually demolished during the Second World War by bombing of Italian and German aviation, and then by some other dramatic circumstances. But in the beginning of 19th, British people, British community in Malta started renovation at this site. And believe me, after 10 years, it was a fantastic place because of the memory and, of course, of the honor. Because people honored their past, their history, and they made utmost to make this place as one of the most symbolical place of British history in Malta. And I was so happy when my friends came over and told me that, Sergey, look, there are some pieces of the marble monument which actually devoted to the Russian Navy officer who was buried in Malta in 1830. And it was a real fantastic story with a Russian Navy archive in St. Petersburg, some other authorities in Britain, in Russia, in Malta, and after 3 years we restored this big monument on the grave of Captain Schlippenbach. And what is a shame, he was actually a great-grandson of that General Schlippenbach, who was defeated by Peter the Great troops in Poltava battle in the beginning of the 18th century. This officer was in service in Russian Navy for more than 35 years, and he was buried in Maltese land at the British governmental cemetery. I just want to wish you a good discussion, but you should know that in Moscow, in Russia, is an organization, Rossotrudnichestvo, who actually will celebrate 90th anniversary next year, and it would be a big festivities in Moscow. And this organization is created and working just for make this mutual understanding between people all over the world even stronger. And I just made you some examples of our work. So non-political, just humanitarian, and just this bridging people, bridging cultures, and working for all those purposes which we are meeting for right now here in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Sunil Chopra, Mayor of Southwark. Please welcome.
His Excellencies and distinguished guest and special guest figure today, Mr. Sergey, from Moscow to attend this conference. And I feel quite happy and privileged to be here to show my support and our support to bring those relationships together and to make a better understanding. At a time, like Ambassador said, there's a little bit of ifs and buts are going on between the countries, and the same thinkings are coming again, that what is going to happen in this present day and age when we all thought the Cold War is over. And I was very privileged and happy to lead the delegation to St. Petersburg a few months back, and with the Arctic convoy. So I saw the warmth and the passion from Russian people and the welcome they gave us. It was very amazing, and I never felt during that visit that we had any misunderstanding in the past. It shows everybody has forgotten everything and everybody is welcoming the new era which has started, and I was very happy to be part of that delegation, and the amount of respect they gave to the whole delegation, creating such a momentum in St. Petersburg's unveiling of the statue. So these were the experience when I came back, and I shared with my colleagues. So it was a very memorable thing for me to do. So now, today, about the thinking of public diplomacy, what can be done? I think in the new era, the best thing known today in present day and age is called soft power. So I was happened to be there yesterday at the event organized by local CRR organization next to our borough in Lambeth. And this is, I think, the first step which they have done to have an exhibition of the books, which some books were brought by Margarita from Russia also, giving the present. So these are the interaction between two cities, two societies. These are the soft steps which I think we need in present day and age. And along with soft steps, there are many people, like I'll say, individual political parties, elected people like us, government appointed officials, some correspondent, trade union people, labor union people, an educational institute also, and religious organization. And also I was thinking, like we do in locally, like ethnic groups, they all can influence the opinion of local people, the government people, when they make the decision or international decision. It can make a lot of impact on the decision to make better understanding between the two countries and two societies. So I think these are the new approach we have to do in present day and age. And also it is very important in present day and age that the countries, those who may have lost a little bit of power, to show that they are still powerful only by showing that they are reliable and honest, and they have a nice image in international, because international is a whole world is very like a small family now, is like a village, so everybody knows about each other. So we have to show that image and respect in between the countries to have that credibility and goodwill to be there. And also I think another thing we can do is to bring culture, sports, and universities, and maybe exchange program can also bring the countries together and show the respect towards each other. And I think we got many distinguished people here, they will give their own contribution. So with these words I'll say it is very, very important that we must keep on doing whatever we do. With this thing I'll just add one little thing about which I think indirectly Ambassador mentioned about the diversity. So I live in a borough called Southwark, where I'm the first Indian person who got elected as a mayor of Southwark. We never had any Indian councillor in the whole borough. And now I become the mayor. I'm the first Indian origin mayor who got elected in this borough. So why I'm mentioning this? This is very important. Wherever we live, we welcome the other society, keep in trust with the other society, another human being, and show that we are celebrating the diversity, whether it's locally, whether internationally. So now we have to live as a one society in the world. So if we show respect to each other, whether it's by British people, whether it's by Russian people, or even other people living in this whole world, so we have to think we are living as a one family. So we have to break those barriers and we have to move forward in life. So whether it's through exchange program, whether it's through the business or culture program, anything like the same visit we had to Russia. So these are the small steps we all have to take in our own limits and in our own organization basis or political or social basis. So with these words, I'll say good luck to the conference. My good wishes are with you, and I hope you will carry on doing the good work, and whatever contribution we can do, we will put that contribution to you. And I'll say big thanks to Charles and also to Ralph and Margarita and all the other people those are involved. There's a big list of the people, whether it's SCR or another university of Petersburg. So everybody whosoever is here, so others I'll be whole day here saying name, but please accept my heartiest congratulations today for organizing this and inviting me here and to make me a part and show my support to your society. And all the best, and hope we'll carry on doing the good work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this warm welcome. And let me introduce now Sergey Nekrasov. Sorry, just a second. Sergey Nekrasov, Russian National Museum of Alexander Pushkin director, and I would like to thank you for this beautiful exhibition that we have on the walls, installed on the walls behind us, and just, ladies and gentlemen, to your left is the exhibition which is called When the Lyceum Was Founded, based on the collections from the National Pushkin Museum. And the exhibition When the Lyceum Was Founded tells the story of one of the most famous schools in Russia, the Imperial Lyceum. Thank you. Please.
Доброе утро, дамы и господа. Я нарушу несколько протокол и скажу несколько слов по-русски. А возьмите себя, меня так слышно.
Can you hear Sergey? No. All right. I'm going to interpret Sergey.
Еще раз. Итак, доброе утро, дамы и господа.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Я несколько нарушу
I'm
протокол
going to spoil this protocol here, and I'm going to say a few words in Russian,
потому что мне очень хочется, чтобы от имени нашей делегации, которая
to
прибыла
speak
из
on behalf of
Петербурга,
our delegation that have arrived from St.
на
Petersburg,
русском языке прозвучали слова благодарности
to say a few words in Russian as part of the greetings.
Ассоциации по развитию сотрудничества.
I will speak consecutively, or interpret consecutively.
Прозвучали слова благодарности Ассоциации по развитию сотрудничества с Россией, Ассоциации международного сотрудничества Санкт-Петербурга. Хотелось бы также поблагодарить посольство Российской Федерации, Россотрудничество, в доме которого, в представительстве которого мы сегодня имеем возможность провести эту конференцию, и фонд имени князя Александра Михайловича Горчакова. Смотреть более подробно.
I would like to say that we're very grateful to many organizations that have made this event possible. The Embassy of the Russian Federation, the Association for the International Cooperation in St. Petersburg, the Society for Cooperation in Russian and Soviet Studies, Rossotrudnichestvo, who's hosting us here, and the Alexander Gorchakov Foundation or Fund, Public Diplomacy Support Fund. Alexander Gorchakov was a co-student of Alexander Pushkin, and you can see that we brought an exhibition of our National Alexander Pushkin Museum here.
Роль народной дипломатии и роль различного рода культурных проектов в те времена, когда, в то время, когда международная обстановка является сложной, конечно, как известно, очень велика, поэтому нам приятно, что мы могли свой небольшой маленький вклад внести в это серьезное и благородное дело.
In this hard times, the geopolitical situation, the role of public diplomacy is enormous, and we're very happy that we can contribute our small, contribute in a small way, but our way to the fostering of cooperation between our countries.
В вступительном слове господина Чеснокова уже прозвучала основная информация о старейшем Пушкинском музее России, который я имею честь представлять. Я еще раз хочу поблагодарить за содействие в реализации наших проектов организацию Росsotrудnicheства, потому что в различных странах Европы состоялись выставки, посвященные императорскому Александровскому царскосельскому лицею, одну из которых мы представляем здесь, в этом зале.
I would like to again reiterate what Mr. Chesnokov has already said, that we represent the oldest Pushkin Museum in Russia, and again my thanks go to Rossotrudnichestvo, because with their help we've had a number of exhibitions in Europe, and especially the Lyceum, Pushkin Lyceum exhibitions.
Я хочу выразить надежду, что в будущем году, в 2015 году, в тот год, который объявлен по указу президента Российской Федерации годом литературы, этих проектов будет не меньше. И мне очень приятно, что именно в Великобритании открывается выставка как раз в канун этого года литературы. Обратите внимание вот на эту картину. Это один из вариантов картины художника Репина, где изображен Пушкин на лицейском экзамене. 8 января 2015 года исполнится ровно 200 лет этому замечательному событию, когда Пушкин на лицейском экзамене был провозглашен великим русским поэтом. С этого началась русская литература. И мне кажется очень приятно, что именно с проекта Великобритании, выставочного проекта Великобритании, который является составной частью конференции, посвященной роли публичной дипломатии в развитии российско-британских отношений, мы начинаем год литературы.
According to the decree of the President of the Russian Federation, next year, 2015, will be declared the Year of Literature, and it's very important that on the eve of this Year of Literature, we're opening this exhibition in Britain. And if you can see over there, there's a copy of a version of a famous painting where Alexander Pushkin is taking an exam at the Lyceum, and on the 8th of January 2015, there will be exactly 200 years since that event happened. At that event, Alexander Pushkin was actually proclaimed to be the greatest poet of Russia. And so this exhibition is, of course, part of the upcoming Year of Culture, and we're very grateful to our hosts who have, made it possible to have this exhibition here.
Во время перерыва мы покажем небольшой фильм на этом экране, также посвященный лицею. Я думаю, это будет тоже интересно. Еще раз большое спасибо организаторам конференции.
Organisers, it's been very much a joint project with the Force of Nature, which is Margarita Mudrak from St. Petersburg. I think it's been a very interesting experience, just the development of the conference. And as with many things, we may not get everything right, but we do our best. I'd like to say that there's been a mention already of a 90th anniversary. The SCRSS, as you've seen on the booklet that I've left on each chair, we celebrated our 90th birthday this year. So we are delighted that in this 90th anniversary year, which is very special for our society, that the two governments decided to have the UK-Russia Year of Culture to mark our anniversary. I think that was very kind of them. So from the, I think there are so many distinguished speakers, and there will be a talk from Andrew Jameson from the SCRSS talking about the society. So I'll just address at the moment some organisational issues. We have a whole raft of speakers, and I'm hoping that we will work our way through them in fairly quick succession. We're relying on the chairs of the various sessions to assist and help in that. But if you have any questions or issues during the day, then do come and see me, speak to me. I'll do my best to try and sort out any problems. And I think all it needs for me to say is that I should mention at this point, reflecting back on Sergey's point about the memorial, is that on November the 9th, that's Sunday, November the 9th, there will be a ceremony at the Soviet War Memorial with Councillor Chopra will be there to mark the UK Remembrance Sunday.
Morning everybody, and welcome to the first plenary session of today's conference. I'm going to chair this plenary session. As Ralph said, I am the Vice Chairman of the Society for Cooperation in Russian and Soviet Studies, which many, if not all of you, will know is a national organisation but based in Brixton. I think that's about all I'm going to say about the SCRSS. As Ralph has mentioned, our fellow council member, Professor Andrew Jameson, is going to talk about the society towards the end of the day. But what I will say is that we have a marvellous photo exhibition on at the centre, 320 Brixton Road, if the address doesn't immediately spring to mind. And there's some really quite magnificent photographs, so if you haven't visited, I would encourage you all to visit. And what I would say in particular, that there is an exceptional photograph of Margarita Madrak, who has come with the Association for International Cooperation. So it's worth going to see that alone. As Ralph mentioned, I don't really have a speaking part in the proceedings this morning. I'm going to chair the plenary, and I will be quite strict on 10 minutes, or perhaps now even less than 10 minutes each. If people come to speak, introduce themselves. The reason for that is because we're recording the proceedings, and if at the end we have an opportunity for questions, there'll be a roving mic for anyone who wants to make a brief contribution or to ask a question. But just by way of brief introduction, I might mention that I first heard of public diplomacy defined as citizen diplomacy, and that was in the 1980s when I was running a Russian language seminar for Progressive Tours. And there was an American lady participant who said she was active in citizen diplomacy, which I thought was a novel development. But of course, I could think back to my own experience in the then British Soviet Friendship Society, and also in the town twinning movement, which did provide opportunities for ordinary citizens to get on and build links with the then Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation. And what I would say in terms of town twinning was the real importance of working together with civic partners, local authorities. And for that reason, I'm very delighted that Mayor Sunil Chopra from my own borough, the London Borough of Southwark, is with us today. But I think that's all that time allows for me to say. And I will now call the first speaker, Tatyana Yemelyanova, who is the head of the International Cultural Programs at the St. Petersburg Association for International Cooperation. And Tatyana will talk about St. Petersburg and Britain, the force of friendship. Thank you, Tatyana.
Thank you. As it was said already, I represent St. Petersburg Association for International Cooperation. And I would like to express our thanks to Alexander Kramarenko Public Diplomacy Fund. We are very grateful to this fund because only thanks to them we could organize this conference. Of course, we are mostly grateful to our partners, the Society for Cooperation in Soviet and Russian Studies, especially Ralph Gibson, who was the main leading force in organizing of our conference. And of course to our long-term partners, that is St. Petersburg Forum from Paisley, Pushkin House, Scotland Russia Forum, and others. It is thanks to those organizations that the idea of organizing such conference came into our mind, especially during the year of cross-cultural relations between Britain and Russia. Well, of course you know that non-governmental relation between different countries, or soft power, as it is nowadays common to call it, is a very important factor in development and strengthening relations between countries and people. It is characterized by a very high level of stability and influence, and it creates a favorable climate for realization of political initiatives of the governments. The St. Petersburg Association for International Cooperation, which I represent, is a very unique organization in the sphere of public diplomacy. It embraces 46 friendship societies and association for cultural and humanitarian and business cooperation with foreign countries, such as Britain, USA, France, Finland, India, Arab countries, Greece, Poland, Cuba, Angola, and many others. I don't have time to name all of them. The association is a center of activities for such international organizations as Rotary International, Lions International, the English-speaking Union, Friendship Force International, SOAR Optimist. All of them are under the umbrella of our association. Numerous corporate and individual members represent the whole spectrum of St. Petersburg life: museums, libraries, universities, schools, business societies. There are more than 1,000 members, individual members in our organization, and more than 50 corporate members. We work in close contact with the government of St. Petersburg, especially with the External Relations Committee, also the Committee on Culture, Education and Legislative Assembly. Well, of course, you know, I won't say much about it, but I would like to say also to remind you that relations between Britain and St. Petersburg have been developing since the beginning of the 18th century. St. Petersburg at that time was only founded by Peter I, whereas at that time Britain was flourishing, and so Peter I laid the foundation of cultural links between St. Petersburg and Russia and between our countries. And those links developed intensively during further years. Russia borrowed a lot of good traditions, styles of architecture, philosophical ideas. Maybe you know that the last Tsar Nicholas II had an English tutor, Charles Heath, since his childhood until his adult years, whom he respected very much. And at that time, English came into fashion in Russia and even replaced French in high societies. Late after the revolution, Britain was the first country which signed trade agreement with the Soviet Union and made diplomatic contacts. Following the steps of political reapproachment, there appeared the initiatives of establishing new forms of cultural links, formation of non-governmental societies, and association of cultural cooperation between the USSR and Russia. In 1924, the British Society of Cultural Links with the USSR was created, and public diplomacy allowed to soften and overcome the political and economical isolation of the young Soviet state. During the Second World War, Britain and the USSR were allies, and Britain rendered a great help to the victory of Russia against Nazi Germany. Arctic convoys brought food, tanks, fuel, airplanes to Murmansk and Archangel. Committees and funds were established in Britain to raise means to support Russia. Maybe you know the story of the Scottish album, when the women of Scotland from Monklands wrote letters of support to the besieged Leningrad, to the women of Leningrad, with admiration for their courage, and the women of Leningrad responded to their letters. In 1958, the Soviet Society of Friendship and Cultural Links with Foreign Countries was established. And at the same time, the USSR Great Britain Friendship Society. In Leningrad, there was a branch of this society, which was situated in Shuvalov Palace. Perhaps you know this palace on Fontanka River, and the St. Petersburg branch of Friendship Society was there for many, many years. Unfortunately, during last year, we had to leave this palace because we were not financed, and we didn't have finance for it, but we moved to not a bad place, a nice place, and we still keep the name Friendship House, which is known to most of you. Well, so returning to the present time, under our roof of the Association of the International Cooperation, we established a number of organizations developing relations with Britain. They are Association of Cooperation with Britain, the English-speaking Union of St. Petersburg, and St. Petersburg, Manchester Friendship Society. Our relations with Manchester have a long history. The very idea of partnership came when the citizens of Coventry in Britain was heavily bombarded, and they suggested to establish twin-city relationship with Stalingrad. When Cold War began, people's diplomacy was developing as the only channel for establishing normal human relations. The Treaty Agreement between St. Petersburg and Manchester was signed in 1962, and since then those relations have been very fruitful and very warm. And so we are very grateful to Manchester Friendship Society. Catherine Danks will speak, who is the chairman of this society, will speak in more details about that. We regularly hold days of Manchester in St. Petersburg and days of St. Petersburg in Manchester. And during those days we organize exhibition, concerts, seminars, and the people not only enlarge their knowledge of both cities, but they establish personal, friendly links. Starting from the year 2010, every year students group from St. Petersburg come to Manchester for the course of language and culture. In November, we are preparing an exhibition in Russian National Library in St. Petersburg, together with Manchester Friendship Society, dedicated to the history of our relations. And again, great thanks to Catherine Danks, and who will speak about our cooperation later on. In 1998, the ESU St. Petersburg was opened, and during the years of its existence, we have been holding lectures and seminars about modern Britain. We got grants from the ESU for participating in the seminars Modern Britain in Oxford and master classes in Shakespeare Globe Theatre. Every year, young people from St. Petersburg participate in the International Public Speaking Competition, and the British Consulate General in St. Petersburg helps us a lot. Well, of course, the Society for Cooperation in Russian and Soviet Studies is our most active and long-term partner. We've been working together for more than 30 years, and I would like to say a few words about the Russian language seminar, which we hold every year in this organization for the teachers and students studying Russia. And during latest years, it was not only the seminar on the Russian language, but also the seminar on Russian culture. I have to finish. Also, we are very grateful to St. Petersburg Forum, Tom and Elizabeth Clark, and Helen Morrison. They will speak about later on. And every year, with their help, we hold Days of Scotland in St. Petersburg, which are very, very popular, including Burns Supper, and the tickets for this supper are sold out completely, and there is also a waiting list. They also organize Days of Scotland in St. Petersburg, and during those days they hold a competition among school children, how well do you know Scotland? And the 3 winners of this competition come to Scotland for 2 weeks to learn about Scotland, about its culture, and great thanks to Elizabeth and Tom Clark and Helen Morrison. And of course I can't but speak about yesterday's exhibition. It was a wonderful exhibition organized with the help of our association and SCRSS, and I would like to advise you, of course, to visit this exhibition. I was rather bewildered by what the British people wrote about Russia. The key words were cold, vodka, and winter. And many of them, some of them, have never been to Russia. That shows that they get their information only from mass media. So that is not. So we don't want the period of Cold War to return. And public diplomacy and people-to-people relations are very important, not to allow the Cold War period to come. So
thank you.
To give you a little bit of a setting of why I should even be here, I was flying to South Africa on holiday, open up the in-flight magazine, thank you British Airways, and there's this wonderful story about Theo Fabergé, the grandson of Carl Fabergé. Well, it was an amazement to me. Had I really known the Fabergé name? Just a little bit. Did I really know much? Not really. But by the time I got back to England, I was so excited that I actually phoned him, because this article said that he was once again making creations, not copies, but his own designs in today's time. So when I phoned him, he actually said, well, why don't you come and visit me? What an honour. So I thought I'd drive down. He lived on the south coast, and perhaps I'd have half an hour with him, and perhaps he would allow me to look at some of the things he made, even perhaps look at his studio. Well, when I went there, Theo was standing there waiting for me, and was completely a different sort of man than I thought he might be. A totally humble person, interesting, his whole house filled with books, didn't matter which room you went, shelves and shelves of books. And it was probably one of his greatest assets when he travelled the world later on with me. Didn't matter who spoke to him, what their interest was, he knew something about it. And of course, this endeared people to this really wonderful English gentleman. And I use that word gentleman very carefully. If you were to drop something, he would rush to pick it up. A lot of famous people, and Theo certainly was famous, when they do events, they say, oh, I'll be there for 20 minutes, I'll sign 6 pieces of art or whatever. Theo was totally the opposite. He would arrive perhaps at 10 in the morning at Saks Fifth Avenue and still be talking to the people at 6 o'clock in the evening. So Theo and I started talking. Cutting the story a bit short, I went away with a prized possession, an egg made from snake wood, very unusual wood, and he said something very profound, and that was he loved making the pieces, he loved designing it, but when it came to marketing, he was lost. I just chipped in, well, that's what I do. Anyhow, I left with my prized possession, didn't hear from him for 18 months, suddenly get a phone call from him saying, would you like to come and see me? My brain stinks, it's made something else out of snakewood. Of course I accept, and again I arrive, the cup of tea is there, and he says, I would love to. Love to what, thinks I. I had forgotten the conversation, and he said, well, I'd love to work with you. And that really was the beginning of what we called the St. Petersburg collection. Why did we call it that? Theo didn't want to just use his name. He didn't want any confusion that it might be confused with his grandfather. And who thought that St. Petersburg in 1984 would ever be called St. Petersburg again? History has caught us up a bit. Theo related going to St. Petersburg for the first time in the 1970s. The outstanding memory for him was the KGB following him everywhere because there were stories that Carl Fabergé had secreted pieces of jewellery which had not been found. In fact, that became a true story because they did eventually find some hidden in the walls in St. Petersburg workshop many years later. In 1993, through pressures of our collectors, we actually arranged the first trip to St. Petersburg. People are somewhat wary of going to Russia for the first time. It's not so bad anymore, but I remember in 1993 the airport was quite a frightening place. There was one single door you went into, dark room with a single light bulb, and your passports were removed from you. Things have changed a lot, I'm very happy to say. And from that first visit in 1993, which I have to say was arranged, I call them the House of Friendship, and Margarita Mudrak, who has looked after our group every year since. And on that very first time, I made a promise. And that promise was we would bring a group of our collectors every year to carry on friendship between England, you might say, and Russia. We're now in our 22nd year of bringing groups. I chair every year, I bring the groups with me. And who would have thought these visits would have brought friendship, the opportunities they have, or you might say in different words, the diplomacy of art and Theo Fabergé. I have to say that each year the curators of the museums do a fantastic job. Over the 22 years I've been going, it is amazing what they have achieved. Our trips really are so special because of those curators, what they do for us. How many other people can go round, for example, Catherine's Palace when it's empty? How many other people get met at the doorstep of the Hermitage so we don't have to queue? And so I could carry on. This year was a very special year. It's the 300th anniversary of the Hermitage. I'm sorry, 250, sorry, I'm confusing 300th of another, 250th anniversary. And I was delighted that Theo Fabergé had designed a very special egg for this occasion. I presented it and Dr. Michael Petrovsky accepted this wonderful gift for the Hermitage. Of course, around that, our wonderful friend Olga was there as well. to help me through some tribulations of wanting things done my way, which didn't quite happen, but that's the way things are. By the way, as a little sidestep, if you ever get invited by Olga for a cup of tea, do accept it. First of all, she makes a wonderful cup of tea, and her office is probably the most beautiful office. It overlooks the whole palace square and is a wonderful sight. Our association with Tsarskoye Selo is very special. Margarita probably remembers the very first time we sped past Alexander Palace, they weren't even allowed to mention what it was. And over the years, slowly, after years, we were allowed to stop on the outside. And then one year, years later, we were allowed to drive in. And so, you might say, not only is my heart in St. Petersburg, but a special association started with Alexander Palace. So much so that I remember very clearly getting a call from Alexander Palace and saying, we found this wonderful portrait of Nicholas II. It's an oil painting. We don't have any budget to buy it. Do you think you can somehow collect funds to buy this purchase back for the palace, because it was originally in the palace? And this has continued for many years. I can tell you now we have bought 74 items back for Alexander Palace, including furniture, chairs that were in the Oval Room where the Tsars were taken from, clocks, toys belonging to the Tsars, children, clothes, and so much more. Who would have thought that this connection, flying by British Airways to South Africa, would have brought such results? Brought me all over the world, taken Theo to the White House, stayed in the White House at the invitation of Mrs. Clinton, because we do a huge amount of charity work worldwide. And we really, this is the most important part of my job, is actually to help wonderful charities around the world to succeed in their goals. And none of this would have happened had it not been for Theo Fabergé, for people like Margarita, for friendship, for special relations. And this is what it's all about. Being kind enough, being accepted, being allowed to do things which normally aren't allowed to be done, which produces such wonderful experiences for people. And this is one of these experiences, being able to be here today, being able to speak to you all, and being able to bring to you how special life is, and how special art and people like Theo Fabergé.
Children in Manchester, and you can see our symbol, the bee, and the ship for St. Petersburg. This one, and now this is an emblem that we use a lot in our work in terms of the friendship of the two cities. I'm going to go, because I'm a historian, I have to do a bit of background, it's compulsory. I'm not going to do historiography, so you'll be very pleased to hear that. Why Manchester, Leningrad initially? Manchester was the national headquarters of the Hands Off Russia Committee, which was set up to stop the Allied intervention that was trying to end the Bolshevik Revolution. So we've got this long history of links with Russia, Soviet Union. There was a lot of trade between Russia, Soviet Union and Manchester starting in the 1920s. There had been the 19th century, but through our cooperative society, grain came into the port on the canal in Manchester in, I think it was about 1923, from cooperatives in the Soviet Union. So again, there's trade, there's politics. We've had a very active communist and Labour parties and trade unions in Manchester as well. And that kind of slightly leftist tendency also helped to develop links between the two countries, really. So with trade unionists going to the Soviet Union, writing reports when they came back. There's lots of reports in trade union newspapers about the Soviet Union in the 20s and 30s. And then also wartime production. During the war, we had the Soviet ambassador, Mr. Maisky, came to Manchester, I think it was 3 times. he spoke to workers at, in our Old Trafford industrial area who were producing goods which were then being sent to the Soviet Union via the Arctic convoys often. And you got this kind of cross-party commitment to a kind of wartime alliance and sort of shared concerns and shared interests. We had lots of cultural events during the war as well, lots of films to promote what life was like in the Soviet Union. As I said, the ambassador came, there would be folk dancing, there would be music, and film shows to explain why we had a kind of wartime alliance. And then in 1949, this is like the first major step towards the twinning of the two cities. Fraternal greetings were sent from trade unions in Leningrad to their partners, well, who become their partners in Manchester. And this still exists. We have a wonderful library called the Working Class Movements Library. It's actually in Salford, which isn't part of Manchester, but we claim it when it suits us. So that exists, and it's sort of this sort of size, photographs of Leningrad trade unionists, and it's a very valuable document for a historian like me. When I saw that, and they'd misidentified it in the catalogue, and it was put in front of me as a school visit from 1962, and I opened it and I thought, oh no, this is something much better. This is our Lord Mayor, who made the first civic visit to Leningrad in 1956. This film is a 20-minute film of their whole visit, so there's some stills which I've got taken from it. So here he is arriving in Leningrad. It's February, it's cold. They were very concerned about how cold it was going to be. I'm sorry, it's a concern for English people about Russia. I'm sorry, Tatiana, it is. In fact, one of the reports was that one of the ladies, or some of the ladies in the group, had actually sewn fur inside their dresses, which I find most bizarre. But they wanted to keep warm. So here he is arriving. And this is the kind of thing they saw, because these are serious politicians. They're not just there on a holiday. They were very aware that both cities needed to reconstruct after the war, and they had a very clear agenda. They wanted to see reconstruction, to see if Manchester could learn anything. They wanted to see public transportation. They went to factories. And so they were kept very busy. They wanted to be. This is perhaps a nicer moment. This is actually the aide to our Lord Mayor, Jock Essen. And this is actually the Pioneer Palace, if you remember it, on Nevsky, which still exists. And so they were meeting pioneers, meeting children, and generally having a really good time. I should also say, as an aside, because I am a historian, some of them went to Moscow, and one of them clearly left something in his hotel room, and I found a document in our archives in Manchester signed Malyenkov, who you will all know, Malyenkov. Malyenkov took the trouble to write to a councillor who had left something in his hotel room in Moscow. He doesn't say what it is, and I sat with this document in front of me thinking, what could he have left in his bathroom that Malyenkov bothered to write and to return it? So they were looked after very well as guests. Visits were exchanged, and then 1962 is the Friendship Agreement, and that's when we date our 50 years from. And in a sense, there's a sort of a structure which is then in place. Education, school visits, particularly strong in the 60s and 70s. They've become perhaps less common as Russian has disappeared from state schools as a language that's being taught. Okay. Science, particularly in the 60s and into 70s, between Jodrell Bank and Pulkovo observatories, but in the areas of science, visits by scientists in each city. Cultural events, the two libraries, particularly what I still call it the Publichka, I'm sorry, that's what it is to me, in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and our central library, exchanged exhibitions. Sometimes they would actually lend books, valuable books for research as well. Exhibitions to promote knowledge and understanding, and also concerts in each other's cities. Now, my co-conspirator Brian's going to talk about the Balalaika Orchestra this afternoon, so I'm not going to go into that at all at this stage, just mark it there. And there's also an exchange of civic visits. They happen pretty much every couple of years, and that's been going on now for several decades. We also had a pretty strong British-Soviet Friendship Society in Manchester, and they organised fetes, concerts, films, holidays. They were very good at organising trips to the Soviet Union and welcoming Russian Soviet guests as well. This is a visit by some Manchester teenagers to Leningrad in 1964. They stayed at a pioneer camp, and you can see they're at the big war ceremony in Leningrad. Things never stay still, and in the 80s and 90s, with the political changes in the Soviet Union, which I don't need to go through for this audience, there are positive changes and some difficult ones. In the 1980s, for example, it became possible for people to stay in people's homes in the Soviet Union, but also to come and stay in Manchester. The difficult times of the 1990s with the economic changes. In Manchester, for example, the Lord Mayor organised an appeal in the early 90s to send medical aid, children's clothing to Leningrad because the city was perceived to be having some major problems. Also the Book Aid programme, which was about sending books and journals because the library budgets had just disappeared for a while. So people in Manchester organised raising money and literally sending boxes and boxes of books and academic journals to the libraries of St. Petersburg, as we now call it. 1998, 300th anniversary of Peters the Great. You can always see typos when it's huge and on a screen, don't you? Peter the Great's visit to Britain. And this was designated by our governments as a year of cooperation and exchanging of knowledge. And so you had people from St. Petersburg, for example. We had a group of deaf students coming to one of our colleges and putting on art displays and plays. We also had people from Manchester going and working with people at your Northwestern Technical University and in prisons about prison education and prison conditions, but sort of learning from each other. It wasn't just a one-way street. So Manchester City Council and Manchester City College were working with the prison service in the Northwest. So here we see the Lord Mayor, and they're kind of putting together a lorry load of goods to go to Russia. So homestays, Lord Mayor's appeal, Relief of Orphans Funds. This is a charity that was set up in Manchester to provide funds for orphanages in St. Petersburg and the surrounding area. It still exists today, and every December we have a charity concert to raise money, and money is sent still to St. Petersburg. I think mostly nowadays it's used to support graduation ceremonies for people leaving the orphanages. Sorry, Margarita's nodding, so she knows more about this from their end than I do. But in the past it's been used to buy washing machines or physiotherapy equipment or bedding, things that were needed in the orphanages. The book aid schemes I've mentioned, and we got 1998. So I'm an academic, I have to recap every so now and again. Also, organisations change. So the British-Soviet Friendship Society was sort of coming to an end with the end of the Soviet Union. It lost members, it lost funding. In Manchester, there were enough people who didn't want to end the twinning, the friendship link, and a new organisation was formed called the Manchester St. Petersburg Friendship Society, and founded June 1990, and I'm the chair of the organisation. We are a politically independent organisation. We do not get money from any political party or any government, and we're very proud of this. But we do work with Manchester City Council and the Association for International Cooperation in St. Petersburg and St. Petersburg City Administration, and our constitution commits us to promoting friendship and understanding.
Thank you, Catherine.
Not from the final bit?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Whatsoever.
Okay. One of our big events is our commemoration of victory, which happens in May every year. Here we see members from the Russian embassy, and also Mr. McNeil, one of our Arctic Convoy veterans, who was given his Ushakov Medal by the Ambassador in October. And now, just one final bit about the future. If I pat him, he'll let me keep talking. Is town twinning a thing of the past? I think it's now considered just generally less important than it was in the post-war period, not specifically for Russia, but for all town twinning. A lot of them have just died. Manchester City Council has had major budget cuts, so it cannot give us as much support as it might like to. We are two cities which stress education and research, and I think there is a lot of future there in terms of cooperation. For example, we've had a round table on creative industries in Manchester last week. We have a problem, I think, with all civil society organisations in this country. People don't join them. Members are ageing, such as myself. You know, we're having fewer and fewer people joining and then actually organising things and conducting activities. And that's a very practical problem. In Manchester, we also have the impact of the federal law on the propaganda of non-traditional relations. People have mentioned Ukraine. That law in Manchester really impacts on our work. It's what we are asked about more than anything else. Manchester prides itself on diversity and tolerance. This law does not sit well with Manchester values. Our City Council is committed to the twinning. They wrote the St. Petersburg Governor about this, but there were calls to end the partnership. That's not happened, but I don't think we should be complacent.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much.
First of all, on behalf of the St. Petersburg Forum, and in particular Helen Morrison, and I'd like to thank the Alexander Kramarenko Public Diplomacy Fund for their sponsorship. Many people ask why I went to St. Petersburg in 1992. Is this plus or minus? Anyway, the reason was to take part in cycle races with my husband and John and Rita Montgomery, friends from Scotland. Tom and I returned in January 1993 to attend a Burns supper, and we met Margarita Mudrak from the Association for International Cooperation, and she introduced us to her various projects in the city, with particularly orphanages. In 1994, Margarita visited a hospital in Scotland, and a return visit was made to hospitals in St. Petersburg. At that time, there were no hospices or day centres for cancer patients, and this was of concern to us. We set up the forum in 1995. The aim was to promote charitable, medical, educational and cultural links between St. Petersburg and Scotland, and to expand the knowledge of each other's culture, history, language and educational system. With this aim in mind, we invited personnel from St. Petersburg to come to Scotland to visit our hospices, and they received training in special counselling skills by our Macmillan cancer nurses and doctors. We set up a cancer day centre in St. Petersburg and funded it for 10 years. There are now hospices in St. Petersburg. These were backup leaflets. I don't know when anyone's familiar with the backup leaflets. Anyway, one of our projects was to translate all of them into Russian, and they were distributed to the hospitals in St. Petersburg. In the mid-90s, we were concerned about medical supplies, and we shipped 2 containers of hospital equipment to St. Petersburg and supplied the Medical Military Hospital, founded by Scot Sir James Wiley, with glass laboratory slides to help the diagnosis of cancer. We also became involved in 2 orphanages in the city and have supplied and continue to supply equipment, spectacle frames and fund medicines to Orphanage 40. These were taken during some of our trips to the orphanage, and some of the equipment we have supplied. I think this was of particular importance to the orphanage at the time. In Orphanage 46, apart from supplying, for example, curtains and recreational equipment, we run a project called English in Action and fund teachers and resources to enable the young people to learn English and so help with their education and future job prospects. There have been many additional projects over the years. We set up a Scottish library in the House of Friendship to allow young people to research Scotland. The internet has rather overtaken us now, but we hope that many will still use the Scottish books in the library. One of the main objectives was, and still is, focused on education and work with students in the city. The Knowledge of Scotland competition began in 1998, and 4 young people visited Scotland as a result. So far, 60 students and various teachers have been our guests and winners of this competition. They returned to St. Petersburg to continue their education with first-hand knowledge of Scottish scenery and culture. We have also enjoyed guesting many other groups and individuals from St. Petersburg. These are some of our past winners. I think that was at the British Consulate. Yeah. One of our competitions. Art also plays a part in our activities both in St. Petersburg and in Scotland. In 2002, a group of Russian artists visited Paisley and an exhibition of their works was displayed in the museum.
For their invitation to speak this morning with about 2 of my favourite subjects, the Robert Burns World Federation and the Scottish and Leningrad albums, and their role in the education and cultural process in fostering British and Russian relationships. Together, we are going to knock on 4 doors to get a glimpse of this development. The development between the Robert Burns World Federation, the Scottish album, the Leningrad album, and keeping the story alive. When we open this first door, we get an insight into the world of Robert Burns and a sight of Robert Burns in the world. Here is a photograph taken recently at the Robert Burns Birthplace Museum, where there is an exhibition of our 2 great poets, Pushkin and Robert Burns. Also portrayed there are a copy of the Scottish and Leningrad albums. The aim of the Robert Burns World Federation is to promote and honour the memory of Robert Burns and his works, and arrange schools competitions and strengthen the bond of friendship among its members worldwide. The schools competitions, there are over 80,000 students participate in this competition in Scotland every year. In St. Petersburg, I coordinate the competition over there with the help of Elizabeth and Margarita. And there are currently 20 schools participate with up to 50 students who give us the most wonderful essays that you could ever hope to read. This is a copy of the Burns Chronicle. It's an authoritative source of academic information. And alongside that is the famous Mitchell Library in Glasgow. The St. Petersburg winning essays are published in the Robert Burns World Federation newsletter, and a copy is placed in the Burns Room in the Mitchell Library. Here we have some young St. Petersburg students who came across to Scotland and toured Robert Burns venues and theatres with their performance of Robert Burns' Jolly Beggar's Cantata. And they astounded all who heard them with their most wonderful performance. And from Scotland, we go to a group of Russians visiting Australia. This group were from Pushkin, and they were the first foreign overseas visitors to visit Camperdown and see the new renovated Robert Burns statue there. The success of the schools' competitions in Russia and in Scotland depends entirely on the involvement and enthusiasm of the teachers. Here, 2 teachers from Pushkin enjoy a visit to Broughton House, the home of the famous Scottish artist Hornell. Here, another experience offered to young Russians through the Burns Federation is the opportunity to participate in the Aberdeen International Youth Festival. And in this slide there you will see Mikhail Pavlov, a very young Mikhail Pavlov, and he was talent spotted at the festival, and as Elizabeth said, offered the opportunity where he has just recently completed 2 master's degrees in the Scottish Conservatoire. This isn't a very good slide, but the reason for showing you is we have a young Russian student, Serafima Nekiva, meet our First Minister, and if you look at the head of the First Minister, you will see our graphic artist Kenneth McMaster has put in Royal Rampart. And this is her teacher, Frida, meeting the First Minister. Another educational opportunity is the link from Petersburg College and Peter Pringle from West College, Scotland, where the students translated into Russian the Dear Allies book about the Scottish and Leningrad albums. And at the photographic exhibition last night, we saw a photograph of their teacher, Elena Gromanova. Let us now go through this second door, where we will view the Scottish album. Meg Henderson documented the story of the albums in the book Dear Allies, and the students of Petersburg College translated it into Russian under the guidance of Elena Gromanova. And a copy, I'm sure, can be freely available in Russian from Margarita. Unfortunately, the English translations are out of print. 72 years ago, in January 1942, the Scottish album arrived in Leningrad. Extracts from the Scottish album, here you see some of the contents, letters, names, and the amount of monies donated. And here a picture of Edinburgh Castle painted by a local Airdrie artist. Let's go through the third door and have a look at the Leningrad album. This album was produced by ordinary people, art historians and artists. It's described as priceless. Vera Milutina said, "These albums will remain proofs of the great patriotism of the Soviet and Scottish people, and are a contribution to the cause of peace the world over. Anna Lebedeva illustrated and coordinated the album, which has meant so much to the people of Scotland. Let's go through that final door, keeping the story alive. When I think of the siege of Leningrad, I shall always hear the comments made by the students at Petrovsky College. I wish that the siege would never happen again. And I think it's up to you and I to ensure that it never happens again. That nothing is forgotten and no one is forgotten. And I think of our national bard's words, man's inhumanity to man makes countless thousands mourn. Nothing is forgotten, no one is forgotten. And the words that echo through my mind are those that were recited and sang at the Chamber of the Scottish Parliament. A man's a man for all that. Then let us pray that come it what may, as come it will for all that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that. And I shall finish with the immortal words from your bard, Alexander Pushkin. My friends, our union is wonderful. As the soul is inseparable and eternal, it is firm and free. It grew together under the Muse's care, wherever we will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to demonstrate my presentation, Higher Education Institution in the United Kingdom and Russian Relations, the experiment of the St. Petersburg State University of Economics. Higher education institutions are important actors of the public diplomacy. Public diplomacy is implemented by the higher education institution through the educational and research activities. Among them should be highlighted international research and educational projects and the international academic exchanges. To successfully implement these areas, we have to create two appropriate conditions, including the training of the foreign language and mastering the methods and techniques of the intercultural communication. These areas are relevant of the cooperation higher education institution in the United Kingdom and Russia. In my speech, I would like to highlight the experiments of cooperation of the St. Petersburg State University of Economics with universities and organizations of the Great Britain. This slide demonstrates this small information about the history of our university. St. Petersburg State University of Economics is one of the largest economic universities in Russia. It is successor of the two oldest Russian economic universities, St. Petersburg University of Economics and Finance, St. Petersburg University of Economics and Engineering, and the new university, St. Petersburg State University of Services and Economics. The order of the Russian Ministry of Education established St. Petersburg State Economic University in August 2012. This slide demonstrates the small figures about our universities. Now there are 53,000 students, 1,100 PhD students, 7,000 staff, including the 4 professors, and etc. Our university is a very active part of the international cooperation. This slide demonstrates the international cooperation activities at our university. There are more 250 foreign educational partners. Our university have arranged scientific and educational projects, member a number of the international units and networks. Our university participates in the academic change program for students and teachers. From 2011-2013, 3 groups of students, 55 persons, went for the practice in United Kingdom, in Cambridge, London and Manchester, and visited at University of Cambridge, London School of Business and Finance, Business Incubator of London Metropolitan University, Centre of Business and the Intellectual Property of the British Library, University of East London, Manchester Metropolitan University and other organizations. This slide demonstrates the program of our students, practice of our students in the United Kingdom. This program included 3 parts. The one part visit in Cambridge Centre of Entrepreneur and Learning. And the first model includes a visit in accelerator of the London Metropolitan University, is a business incubator, British Library Business and IP Centre, visit in company Schlumberger, and visit of the University of East London. This slide demonstrates the second model of our program for our students in United Kingdom. The second model of the entrepreneurship was Manchester. Our students were prepared the great program in visit in Manchester Metropolitan University. They were able to get acquainted with the university, deploy the Centre of Enterprises, got information of the program 10,000 small businesses. They had the opportunity to visit Manchester Metropolitan University Business Incubator in the space. And our students have a visit in the other organizations, the New Economy Manchester organization. This is a region business organization. Visit in War Concepts company in Manchester, Manchester Metropolitan University, and ITG Assess company. In addition, students have possibilities to make the entrepreneurship in Russian and international companies in a number of the European countries. For example, in the framework of the double degree program with the University of Hamburg, Master of International Business Administration, our students have a practice in the Gazprom company in London, Gazprom marketing training. And this slide demonstrates the results of the practice of our students, the diplomas of the master program, and the visit of the sport club, Chelsea Football Club. And one of our students, Elizabeth Chesnokov, was married in London. Our university has traditionally paying considerable attention of the quality of education. Since 2012, our university takes part in the Tempus project, independent quality assurance model for degree program in Russia. Among European partners of this project, there is London Metropolitan University. The aim of this project to ensure sustainable development of Russian higher education through quality assurance structure of the degree programs in line with the Bologna process and European Union 2020 strategic objects. This slide demonstrates the program of our Tempus project, the several steps of organization this project. The project investigates the models of the quality assurance of educational programs implemented in various European countries, including the principles, methods and the practice of the self-evaluation and external evaluation of the quality of educational programs. This slide demonstrates our partners of our project, the Russian universities and the European universities. Among of the European partners, London Metropolitan University in the first picture is a professor of the professor of the London Metropolitan University, Patrick Gray. The development of the methodology is carrying higher testing the Russian university participation in the Tempus project. We organize seminars in London Metropolitan University. The British system of the quality assurance is known as one of the best in Europe. The project has carefully studying the experiments of the London Metropolitan University. The study analyzed the features of the self-evaluation, internal evaluation of the educational programs, policy and international accreditation in United Kingdom. The seminar organized in 2013 in London Metropolitan University allowed to learn from the work of the Agency for Quality Assurance of United Kingdom, QA, and use these experiments to develop a methodology to ensure the quality of educational program in Russia. Our university have a cooperation with Cambridge Examinations Syndicate to create appropriate conditions for the realization of basic directions of cooperation in terms of the training in the field of foreign language learning. Our university intends enter agreement with the Cambridge Examination Syndicate. This memorandum of understanding is signed in 2012. Our university is interested in raising the level of the students' English and enabling them of the taking examination, which can provide the external objective assessment of the students' knowledge of English. Within this cooperation, the role of our university will be to offer courses learning to Cambridge ESOL exams at different levels, acting the Cambridge ESOL exams preparation center. Cambridge ESOL role will to be support of our university in promoting the examination to its students and it providing support and support for teachers and the students. Cooperation with Cambridge ESOL allows us to create the necessary framework for the training of students in teaching and for the appropriate assessment of their knowledge. In the end of my speech, I would like to say thank you very much for your attention. For me, it's very pleasure to take part in this conference. And I would like to say thank you very much for the Alexander Kramarenko Public Diplomacy Fund and the St. Petersburg Association for International Cooperation. These organizations support for my visit in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you. And I start my not easy speech because I try to present to you my research topic. My research topic is the knowledge economy is my research now in the University of Economics, St. Petersburg University of Economics. Today, the knowledge economy is the prospective sphere of public diplomacy. It is because the knowledge economy is the base of the research, education, and internationalization. We can look at the knowledge economy as a term from two different sides. The first, economy of knowledge, focused on the production and management of knowledge in the frame of economic constants, and knowledge-based economy has second meanings. In the second meanings, it refers to the use of knowledge technologies such as knowledge engineering and knowledge management to produce economic benefits. Sorry. If we look on the knowledge in the first sphere, in the first position, knowledge is product. In the second position, knowledge-based economy, knowledge is a tool. Knowledge is a tool. Who was the first researcher in this sphere? It is Peter Drucker. This person was very important in 1968 because he was the first researcher who formulated what does it mean, knowledge economy. Why it is important today? Why it is even important today? Today, universities and enterprises try to work together. And universities and enterprises try to make new product, innovative product. Innovative product. We need this innovative product because in the world we have globalization, we have new media, and we have new computer networking. Experts suggest that at least 3 driving forces, you see, globalization, new media, and computer networking, change the rules of the business and national competitiveness. The knowledge economy differs from the traditional economy in three case respects. We have 3 characteristics: knowledge, human capital, communications, require new ideas and approaches from policy makers, managers, and knowledge workers. And of course, knowledge is a main product, and universities and are the instruments for creation of these products. EU and Russia developed a very good program for promotion of knowledge economy and contribution of universities cooperation. Very good example of this cooperation is Bologna reform. I think you know university who work at university understand what does it mean Bologna reform. We try to build the joint space, educational space between Russia and European Union. Of course, very good experience for cooperation between different universities is Tempus program. Tempus program now closed, but EU and Russia decided to open new program. It is Erasmus Plus program. In the frame of this program, we have to develop joint projects. And Elena Garbashka told about experience in joint projects. But not only Tempus project motivate the universities to build the knowledge innovation in the frame of cooperation. Today we have a very good experience of Manchester and St. Petersburg cooperation in sphere of innovation. Manchester and St. Petersburg are twin cities during 50 years. It is a great experience, and cooperation between our cities is the result of public diplomacy work of the St. Petersburg Association for International Cooperation and Manchester St. Petersburg Friendship Society. And today our colleague Catherine Dents told about it. The Digital Bridge project was initiated by the universities and association of the and association of both cities. And we have, just a minute, we have very good experience of cooperation. During our cooperation between Manchester University, we developed project Digital Bridge. And during Digital Bridge, we have some events. In September 2012, delegation from Manchester Metropolitan University visited St. Petersburg. During the visit, Professor Catherine Jenks and Head of International Department Deidre Hennes and Russian teachers developed the prospective plan for the project, Digital Bridge, and plan of this project includes several activities during 2 years. The first activities was in September 25th, and St. Petersburg International Innovation Forum invited professionals from United Kingdom, and we organized the renovation and innovation seminar roundtable. In March 2013, in the framework of the project was the conference, Dialogue of Physics and Lyrics. Lyrics, Smart City, and in the list of main speakers of the conference was Dave Carter, head of Manchester Digital Development Agency. Shu Fensham, very good, interesting report was from Shu Fensham, leader of Private Companies Association, Manchester Digital, and two wonderful persons from enterprises, leaders of MedLab, presented innovation in the frame of digital space. The conference was held by the General Consulate of Great Britain in St. Petersburg. In summer, Manchester University organized summer language school for the 40 Russian students from St. Petersburg, and you can see my students here. We was together with Chinese students, and we made a wonderful movie which we presented in St. Petersburg, and we hope now that our exchange program will be continued, and our project receive money from different foundations, because we're going to apply to Erasmus Plus and to British Council. Thank you very much.
So the object of academic exchanges, I think, should be to develop a body of academic opinion which is informed about developments in Russia, and also to further understanding based on real knowledge, as we heard about the Knowledge Society in one of the recent papers. The current reality, however, is that Russia in the West is perceived through two political lenses. In the right eye, it is conditioned by Western soft power, and in the left eye, by the West's dark power. Capturing the academic field with respect to the interpretation of post-communist countries is one of the tasks of Western soft power. Soft power seeks to extend the state's authority by virtue of its culture, values and way of life, as opposed to the use of military force and political coercion. The notion of soft power is both descriptive and prescriptive. Not only does it describe Western values and ways of doing things, but concurrently claims that other people should adopt them. Soft power captures the academic imagination in terms of electoral democracy, free markets, the consumer society, private property, free media, and individual rights. In showing how foreign countries fall short of Western soft power criteria, academic work defines a political agenda of research in foreign countries. While this approach in endorsing Western institutions is relatively benign, many analysts go further and develop a form of dark power, which discredits and delegitimates foreign adversaries. The objective here is to highlight, sorry, I forgot my things there, to highlight developments in the post-communist and other societies which challenge Western presuppositions. The standard of measurement is electoral democracy and promotes the freedom of the individual. This dark power shapes the taken for granted assumptions. And in this way, Russia is invariably assumed to be the guilty actor when infractions take place with Western players. So successful has this ideological offensive been that Russia is widely perceived as the demon in international affairs, which has been a victory for Western dark power. Opinion polls conducted after President Putin said that he would reclaim the Crimea reported that 72% of people in the United States and 63% of people in the UK had an unfavourable view of Russia. In July 2014, 57% of people surveyed in Russia thought that the government of Russia respects the personal freedoms of its peoples, whereas only 10% and 12% respectively of respondents in the United States and the UK thought so. So here again is an indication of the success of Western dark power. Russia has failed to find a Western audience for its own ideological and political position. Even prominent Russian commentators, such as Political Fund President Vyacheslav Nikonov.
This is the nightmare, crossing the border, bringing the check and the postal order. The guys operating the sound system, who speak no English whatsoever, entering into the spirit of things, going, choot, choot, giving us extra effects. Madness? Or an example of the role of the English language in fostering Russian-British relations? Hopefully, the latter. Some weeks prior to this event, I received a phone call one evening from a lady called Marina from Novokuznetsk, who explained that she had heard about me from the book distributors in St. Petersburg. She asked me whether I would be interested in a 3-day teacher training session in Novokuznetsk. I said yes, and I inquired who else would be presenting. No one, she said, only you. Okay. We discussed things a little, and I was about to say, could you send a car, please? You know, 3 days, hundreds of handouts, when something made me rephrase, and I asked, how shall I get there? She replied, by train or by plane. Sorry? She repeated, by plane or by train? To which I inquired, well, excuse me, but thinking that Novokuznetsk was part of the Leningrad Oblast or St. Petersburg region, I said to her, excuse me, but exactly where is Novokuznetsk? Answer? Central Siberia. Ah, right. By then I was committed, and there was no turning back. So, a ticket was duly purchased, and off I went. I think my colleagues thought that they would never see me again. Anyway, on the 3rd day, I was driven out to a small town to work with teachers who had never met an English person before. In the afternoon, I was taken to meet members of the ancient Siberian Shurian tribe. A visit to their beautiful museum was followed by tea and conversation. This, I must share with you, is my one claim to fame. The local journalists were there, and the TV cameras. If I picked up an exhibit, it was click, 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 paparazzi style. Britain appeared on the front page of the local paper and on the TV. For me, those days were a real privilege. For very many of those Siberians, I was the first real-life Brit they had ever met spoken to, and used English with. Those days, in -39, were filled with a warmth it is impossible to encapsulate in words. Undoubtedly, it put a real glow on Russian-British relations. Dispelling the myth, or breaking down barriers, is something which is essential to good relations. After one teacher training session, a participant came up to me and said, "Excuse me, извините, пожалуйста, but exactly what nationality are you? You can't possibly be British. You're far too expressive." This lady had clearly had far too much exposure to Soviet-era textbooks where the Englishman is like a castle. He has a wall around him. Now, hopefully, that session did something to demonstrate that the British do possess emotion. Now, during my time in Russia, I have worked in a number of very different teaching situations. Without doubt, the most enjoyable and professionally fulfilling, not only in Russia, but in terms of my whole career, is my time with the Russian resettlement program, teaching retired and retiring military officers, a post-perestroika project sponsored by the UK government. The level of commitment and sheer determination of the officers was something quite extraordinary. I witnessed motivation as I had never seen it before. Most officers had never had contact with British people until their course. At the graduation ceremony of my first group, I recall one of my officers, Sergey, saying, "A few years ago, I would have been too frightened to have even said good morning to you, let alone sit in a room and be taught by you." It was a wonderful teaching experience, but not without moments of tension. I remember one particular coffee break during the Iraqi war. We all stood in silence watching BBC World News, listening to a report of the latest atrocity, fully aware that our countries and ourselves as individuals held very different views on what was happening before our eyes. When the break was over, we returned to the classroom to conquer together the structure and the usage of the present perfect. Teaching and learning go hand in hand. While I taught those officers the English language and about life in English-speaking countries, I, in turn, learned how to drink vodka the Russian military way. You see? On my birthday, the group I was teaching at that time presented me with a Navy colonel's uniform. Quick look. Okay. Much to their amusement, I wore it to their graduation ceremony aboard a British frigate visiting St. Petersburg. Of course, a number of senior Russian military personnel attended these graduations. And so, they looked at me, then at my lapels, and they all had the same puzzled look on their faces. Of course, in Russia, it is absolutely impossible for a woman to have the rank of colonel. Not a word was spoken. Very diplomatic, I think. Learning a language, be it English or any other, involves much more than memorizing vocabulary and mastering grammar structures. To fully feel a language, you have to have some understanding of the people who use it as their mother tongue. I have been asked to give lectures on a wide range of topics, but probably the most popular remains that of Christmas, okay, with all its traditions. The most memorable of these has to be the annual ESU Christmas lecture. To say that these lectures were interactive doesn't do them justice. Thanks to the involvement of one of the main catering colleges in St. Petersburg, and a wonderful lady by the name of Valentina, who was in charge of the catering department, this lecture was actually a full turkey dinner, punctuated by information about traditions between courses. Now, before the very first of these, Valentina invited me to the kitchen to don a white coat and hat and to teach them about such hitherto unknown things as cranberry sauce, mince pies and stuffing. And here we had practical language learning. They were fantastic evenings, which usually came to an end with a rousing rendering of the 12 days of Christmas, which many people here can testify to. Well, I could probably talk from now until Christmas about ways in which teaching the English language fosters Russian-British relations, but my time is up. and so I would like to conclude by thanking the Gorchakov Foundation for providing the opportunity, I was told to say that, to participate in this conference, and also to say Spasibo Bolshoye Rossiya. Thank you very much, Russia, for 16 mostly wonderful years and the opportunity to do just a little to help further Russian-British relations through teaching the English language.
Honoured guests, my lord, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a governor of the English-Speaking Union, which is an organisation founded in 1918 by Sir Evelyn Wrench after the First World War, and he vowed to make a lasting contribution between nations and make a bridge between peoples of different continents, histories and cultures. The ESU aimed at no formal alliances, has nothing to do with governments, but is merely an organisation to promote good fellowship amongst English-speaking peoples of the world. Sir Evelyn believed that exchange visits between different countries enabled us to understand each other better. He believed that mutual understanding and mutual tolerance form the best hopes for lasting peace. Both a membership and educational organisation, for over 90 years, the ESU has helped thousands of people transform their lives. And as His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, until recently the President of the ESU, said, I believe that Sir Evelyn Wrench would have been delighted to know that the Union has made the transformation from a union of friendship among speakers of English into a dynamic body devoted to the promotion of the use of English as a medium of international communication. In the 1980s, the ESU expanded rapidly overseas, and by the 1990s, the ESU expansion into Eastern Europe had started to take off. Some of this was due to English being the language of business and the internet. And Baroness Brigstock, who was the ESU chairman, and Mrs. Valerie Mitchell, ESU Director General, felt that steering committees from prospective countries should visit the ESU in England and Wales to meet the branches, to learn about the organisation. On one of these visits, a headmistress, Valentina Ignatu, and another teacher came to meet the York branch of the ESU and were entertained by the local members. During an event, a group of members discussed how wonderful it would be to bring over a student from Russia to England to study English at an English school. This would enable them to improve their English, learn about English life at school and interact with the people of York. After much discussion with the Russian teachers from St. Petersburg, I and the father of another old pupil approached the headmaster of my old school, St. Peter's School in York. And this is a boarding school and one of the two oldest schools in England, founded in 627 AD. The reason for selecting a boarding school was that the pupil would feel part of the community rather than going home each day and returning from a host family. We also felt that the student would be amongst the younger community and would make friends easier. The headmaster, Dr. Robin Pittman at the time, was very interested in the project and wanted to meet the two Russian teachers. A meeting was therefore arranged before the teachers returned to Russia, as they wanted to see the facilities and where the students would be placed. Dr. Pittman was immediately attracted to the project and was convinced he could sell it to the Board of Governors. They were very keen on the project, as they had not done anything like this before, and felt that both the Russian student and the English pupils at the school would benefit from this project. The school would also benefit, as this would help with promoting its charitable status, which is an important part of English public schools. Subsequently, Dr. Pittman offered a place to a female student, and at that time the school had just started to take female students after nearly 2,000 years, for one term at St. Peter's, during the autumn, to cause as little disruption to the exams as possible. The scholarship was worth about £10,000, which was a lot of money at that time, as this was the cost of a term as a boarder, and we were delighted to have secured the place for the Russian student. The teachers in Russia were also delighted with the good news. The paperwork now started, as we were new to this, along with the school, and we had to rely on help. Fortunately, we had a contact in a London school who knew how the process worked and was very helpful in steering us in the right direction. We arranged letters of invitation to enable visas to be granted, and the airfares were paid by a donation from the ESU York branch. We left the selection process to the teachers at the Russian end, who selected a 15-year-old girl called Masha Vitkovskaya. They felt she was the best candidate and would get the maximum out of the scholarship.
And I enjoyed coming there, and it's a wonderful, wonderful city, of course. I sit in the House of Lords as a Liberal Democrat, and I'm also a businessman. So there are a number of different aspects to what I do. I felt, just very briefly before we start, I should say one or two words from my own perspective about the state of British and Russian relations currently, because that's our subject. We had a debate in the House of Lords 2 weeks ago, and Russia was the subject of the debate, and I spoke in that debate, and in it I quoted an experience at St. Petersburg State University. I can't remember whether it was in your school or the School of International Relations, but I was asked by a young man, what did I think should be the basis of British-Russian relations? And my answer was that if British-Russian relations are to prosper, both sides have to understand that it is a two-way street. And if that's not acknowledged and not accepted, then basically relations deteriorate. And the present position over relations, which you all know, is a very difficult one. And partly it's difficult because there isn't sufficient dialogue. And the reason why there isn't sufficient dialogue is that ultimately people on both sides of the argument are convinced of their rectitude, and they simply want to increase the pressure either way. So we have sanctions from the West against Russia, and we have, I must say it, some very self-imposed problems in Russia itself, particularly in cutting off imports from various countries, which has led to problems inside Russia, and the sanctions are also having quite clearly an effect. So I think we have to try and move on. Now, I don't have a solution to the problem. If I did, I don't think I would talk about it now anyway. But I do think that it is very important, and it's unfortunate that we have no real conference planned to deal with the West's relationship with Russia. And I think that has to happen. On the agenda of international relations is the idea that there should be a European, by that I mean European Union, a European Union settlement with Russia. Now that has been shelved because of the present crisis in East Ukraine and the Crimea. But, and I said this in the Lords, we should not long defer that prospect simply because it now looks distant. We have to progress in the direction of that. And any such relationship, of course, has to take in the concerns of both sides. It has to establish a two-way street of mutual and shared interest. It has to be realistic about oil and gas. And on the Russian side, it will be crucial to understand that the position over oil and gas is radically altered, partly because of the discovery of huge quantities of shale gas in the United States, also the changed position of the Middle East. So this is a situation that is moving quite radically. You could say the tectonic plates are shifting, and that's why it's so important to talk. So that's my plea. Now, the people who are going to talk to you this afternoon are all very well qualified to do so. Despite their qualifications, I will hold up a piece of paper, ladies and gentlemen, which says 1 minute, and I will be unequivocal and completely uncompromising about that. So if you don't stop within the minute, I will stop you. So I'm sure we will speed on very well, and it would be very nice if we had enough time at the end of the hour to have some questions and some points of view from the floor. Thank you.
Well, this computer is not to show you slides, unfortunately. It's for me to read the paper. So I'll just put it up here. Well, since the chair of the panel asked me to introduce myself, I represent St. Petersburg State University, and I'm the head of Department of English for the Faculty of Journalism. Basically, I'm a linguist, but I work, my department is in charge of teaching English to journalists, as public relations practitioners and advertising students. So my paper today is entitled Mass Media, a Driving Force of Public Diplomacy. First of all, as you've heard many, many times, I would like to express my gratitude to the Alexander Kramarenko public diplomacy support. That's unusual, but to hear at this conference, but here it is again. And it's sincere, anyway, that's for sure. The goal of this paper is to demonstrate that media can effectively act as a driving force of public diplomacy between countries, as illustrated by the UK-Russia Year of Culture 2014. To achieve this goal, we'll discuss various definitions of public diplomacy versus citizen diplomacy. We've heard this term used already at this conference. National image and national branding concepts, and the notion of culture as a constituent part of a country's image. The main thesis of this paper is that media can drive public diplomacy most effectively through conducting citizen diplomacy, i.e. by creating a positive image of not only their own country, but also of another country, in the case of bilateral cultural year coverage, that of a partner country, even if it means subverting their own government's foreign policy. The main claim of this paper operates two similar concepts of non-official diplomacy, namely public diplomacy and citizen diplomacy. In literature, citizen diplomacy is also referred to as people's diplomacy or people-to-people diplomacy. While public diplomacy and citizen diplomacy are often seen as completely interchangeable, there is a crucial difference between them, and we'll see this below. The official American government definition of public diplomacy states, public diplomacy refers to government-sponsored programs intended to inform or influence public opinion in other countries. Its chief instruments are publications, motion pictures, cultural exchanges, radio and television. The European Commission's definition is, public diplomacy deals with the influence of public attitudes. It seeks to promote EU interests by understanding, informing and influencing. It means clearly explaining the EU's goals, policies and activities and fostering understanding of these goals through dialogue with individual citizens, groups, institutions and the media. To sum up, PD, public diplomacy, is a government-sponsored soft power foreign policy mechanism involving governments, organizations and private individuals engaged in dialogue with citizens of another country. The nobler goal of public diplomacy is to foster international understanding through culture. According to New Orleans Citizen Diplomacy Council website, citizen diplomacy is a concept that the individual has the right, even the responsibility, to help shape US foreign relations, one handshake at a time. Citizen diplomats can be students, teachers, athletes, artists, business people, humanitarians, adventurers and tourists. They are motivated by responsibility to engage with the rest of the world in a meaningful, mutually beneficial dialogue. The above definition makes citizen diplomacy look almost synonymous with public diplomacy, since both rely primarily on non-governmental efforts, especially in the field of culture, and can be used to pursue foreign relations by non-governmental means. However, the concepts are crucially different because citizen diplomacy is not necessarily a government-sponsored program of furthering a foreign policy agenda. CD has a broader aspect. It may or may not be a soft power foreign policy tool of government. It has a distinct global humanitarian mission. Citizen diplomacy is recognized as a powerful force in building and sustaining a secure, economically sound and socially interconnected world. In light of the above, is the UK-Russia Year of Culture 2014 a public diplomacy or a citizen diplomacy initiative? To answer this question, we should look at who the organizers are in both countries and what the stated mission of the endeavor is. On behalf of Russia, the UK-Russia Year of Culture is run by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. On behalf of the UK, by the British Council, also supported by the government in this or that way. And of course, the mission is very noble. I will not quote it for the sake of time. But the statement is followed by quotes from Olga Golodets, the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs of the Russian Federation, and the Right Honourable the Baroness of the Sousa, Lord Speaker. The involvement of such high-ranking officials in both countries clearly demonstrate that the UK-Russia Year of Culture 2004 better fits public diplomacy rather than citizen diplomacy definitions. Russian and UK media are at a crossroads then. In the cultural political endeavor, they can either undertake the role of a cultural propagandist on behalf of their country's government, or act as a bridge between the two countries, fostering mutual understanding. In the first case, public diplomacy is used merely as a national branding mechanism, focusing on the promotion of a cultural component of their country's image. In the second, public diplomacy serves both sides and is a means of promoting the other country's culture as well. Let us discuss both options in more detail. A decade ago, a marketing researcher, Simon Anholt, came up with an idea that countries could be marketed like products or companies. He developed a new concept of a nation brand. Since then, the notions of nation brand and national branding as a process of creating a nation brand have become common concepts in image studies. A proper national branding campaign can unite a nation in a common sense of purpose and national pride. The cultural aspect of a nation's image is dignifying because it shows the spiritual and intellectual qualities of the country's people. In the mind of the consumer, culture also works as a metaphor for personality, the national character. And people deduce a great deal about the inner qualities of a nation through its cultural enterprises. Sport equals strength, courage, physical prowess, agility, determination, team spirit, honor, fair play, and so on. Pop music equals street credibility, flexibility, creativity, imagination, a sense of fun. So wherever sphere is more developed in the country and more promoted, it certainly reflects on the perception of the people upon that country. Konstantin Kostyov, then chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the State Duma, the lower house of the Russian parliament, told foreign journalists in 2010 that there were 3 factors to a nation's image: other countries' view of a country, its reputation, objective reality, and the country's image as a brand, i.e. what image it wanted to project internationally. He then continued to say that some countries' reputation fit the existing reality, whereas Russia's reputation was worse than the existing reality, and the reality was worse than the brand Russia wanted to promote. Among the things that the country could do to reverse the tide, Mr. Kostyov suggested A. creating a positive agenda instead of responding to events that had already occurred, and B. involving talking heads who could be able to explain Russia's foreign policy, preferably in English. To use Mr. Kostyov's strategy, culture years create a positive agenda for both Russia and the UK. When people of culture, creators and ordinary people, rather than politicians, become media talking heads. Culture years are a wonderful opportunity to improve the images of the countries participating in them. The role of both countries' media then can be promoting their own country's culture, a good enough role. Through this, mass media create a non-aggressive climate between countries, because in any case, while politics divide, culture unites. Can we ask for more if we consider what obstacles await a cultural journalist? So what obstacles is that be? Objective obstacles, because good news is bad news. Good news doesn't sell. So positive news, any journalist who's done a journalism course will know that there's no conflict in your story, a bad story. So it's a non-story. There's no hidden conflict. You can drop it into the dustbin. Now, so that's objective, the nature of mass media. But then the subjective factors that derive from the current situation, stumbling blocks, geopolitical situation. Now, during an international conflict such as this, even otherwise objective journalists frequently display a strong emotional commitment to the stance of their country's government in the crisis. So, to combat slipping into propaganda, a set of ethical guidelines for journalists have been developed based on the common conceptions about the media as neutrality, fairness, and balance. So, but if you're a good journalist, a balanced journalist, is it enough to be a good public diplomacy promoter? No, I believe that cultural journalism uniquely lends itself to the promotion of public diplomacy through citizen diplomacy, because even governments, when their governments fight, the media can still be positive about and promote the other side. Plato's Socrates advocated dialectic aimed at establishing the truth through reasoned arguments, based on a cooperative view of argument. Sophists taught rhetoric aimed at persuasion, based on an adversarial approach to dispute. Plato's dialectician considered his opponent a partner in discussion, while a sophist saw an adversary in his interlocutor. Media can only act as a driver of public diplomacy if they see a partner in this cultural dialogue, not an adversary.
Just before I begin, there are 2 points that I would like to cover. Well, first of all, some of you may assume that since I'm studying international relations, my text is going to be full of difficult concepts and hard-to-get ideas. Well, that is not the case here. Definitely, I want to assure you there will be 2 terms provided in my speech. And the second point, well, actually, Russian and British relations have got a very personal touch for me. And why is that? I'm going to tell you in the middle of my speech. So listen carefully. So, during our first lecture in St. Petersburg State University, we were introduced to a very interesting term, which is sustainable development. So, to put it in an easy way, sustainable development means that your tomorrow is going to be at least as good as your present day is. And obviously, this term can be applied to numerous spheres, as well as countries' development. Because nowadays, nation-states are looking for ways to develop, to prosper, and to spread their influence globally. In other words, they're looking for sustainable development, or at least part of it. But it's rather hard to spread a will and power using only force. It's quite the contrary, actually, because countries tend to avoid armed conflicts altogether, since this can damage their reputation a lot. Well, of course, exceptions are made, and well, Russia is unfortunately an example, but still the overall trend is quite visible. So there is a question before us: what can be done in order to improve our position and actually spread our influence? And the answer to this question was given in the 1970s by American political scientist Joseph Nye Jr. So he was the first person ever to introduce the term soft power. Now, what does it mean? It refers to the ability to attract allies, to cooperate on a firm basis of mutual respect and benefit, and to eventually spread your will worldwide. So definitely cooperation is vital here, because, well, nowadays there are lots of international problems that cannot be simply tackled all alone. I mean, international terrorism, waste disposal, and other things. So, and cooperation actually gives them the opportunity to use their strong points and to cover their weak ones, and getting significant rewards means that they'll be able to develop in a very prosperous way. So this is going up road, so to say. And obviously Russia and Britain are both very interested in this way. So our countries are actually doing whatever it takes to somehow communicate, and I should say that for me it's actually a shame that in the 21st century our relations have weakened. So it's a relief to know that there are organizations from both sides, well, such as Gorchakov's fund, that are doing whatever it takes to somehow contribute to the development of our relations, and I'd like to thank them for that, of course. Now, to the point. Our relations, I mean Russian-British, were established back in the 16th century, and this is actually my second point, because the first ambassador ever to Great Britain was Osip Nipeya, and he was the citizen of my home country, Vologda. And it's actually a very nice thing for me, that's why it's so personal. Right, so now let's have a look what can be done in order to improve the situation. So we're going to put politics aside for a second and think about the impact of soft power. Because all those cultural exchanges and exhibitions, well, they're aimed at younger generation, I mean people in their mid-20s and even younger. Because they are very adaptive and, well, actually their views can be easily shapen. And, well, that can be both the good and the bad point. Well, let me remind you, for instance, of people who were born in the second half of the 20th century in the Western world. And as you know, there was a separation, there was an iron curtain, so very little information was available actually. So they all got different prejudices, stereotypes, and, well, decades have passed and the USSR collapsed more than 20 years ago, yet those stereotypes, they're still alive and their vision hasn't changed. So I do believe that it is a problem, because right now I'm talking about young people, because if we put some influence onto them, we have to realize that in a decade or so, they're going to be the ones who will rule the country, who will represent the country on different levels, I mean business community, a government sphere, or let's say some tuitional courses. But the thing is that they're going to behave according to their beliefs and views that were shaped long before, in their green years actually. So that, I think, is the real problem. So you have to understand that actually soft power can never be regarded as a quick fix, and we have to think about the far-reaching consequences of our actions. Valery Kharlamov, a great hockey player, was frequently asked about his secret of success. Well, here's what he said. When I'm out on a field, I'm focused not on the place where the puck is, but where it will be. And this is it. I think this principle must be applied to our relations if you want a sustainable development for both our countries and if you want to lay the foundation on a firm basis of mutual respect and cooperation. Because, well, after all, we are all dreaming of living in a secure and prosperous place, so-called the bright future to live in. And we have to do whatever it takes to contribute to this formation in the best way possible. Now, I definitely will. Won't you? Thank you very much.
Dear conference participants, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Rossotrudnichestvo for hosting the conference and for support and hospitality. Dedication to the public diplomacy course of the Society for Cooperation in Russian and Soviet Studies is beyond expectations. And our first words of thanks should definitely go to SCR, especially to Ralph Gibson and Jean Turner and Stuart Clark, Andrew Jameson, Diana Turner and others for their everlasting cooperation and for co-organizing this event. Greetings and best wishes to us were sent by Lord George Robertson, ex-Minister of Defense and ex-General Secretary of NATO, and Baroness Elizabeth Smith. They have always been active promoters of the Russia-Great Britain relations. We are here in London. What can be a better proof of public diplomacy in action? It is not very easy for an NGO as ours to cover expenses of bringing delegation to London. The Alexander Kramarenko Public Diplomacy Fund estimates highly and recognizes the great services of the Russian Association for International Cooperation in the promotion of a positive image of Russia in the outer world. People are supported by families, friends, and communities. States by being members of different international unions. Being an NGO in the sphere of international cooperation, we need support, not only to survive, but to continue our mission of strengthening mutual understanding and people-to-people contacts. You see here with us representatives of our partner organizations that affiliate to association, the St. Petersburg State University, the University of Economics, the State Hermitage Museum. They invite us to non-governmental partners into international projects to highlight our role in academic and cultural cooperation. Our association is no longer a monopolist in the sphere of international relations in Russia, as it has been for a long time in the Soviet Union under the name of the Union of Soviet Friendship Societies. The Soviet government respected this organization, trusted it, and relied on its experience. We still consider this organization as the basis of our people diplomacy. We are trying our best to find a firm and stable position in the system of international policy of our country that can help us to carry out our mission in representing the interests of Russia and protecting its historic and national dignity. In a current situation, we have not changed the principles of public diplomacy, and most importantly, we have preserved all our societies for cooperation with 35 countries. Our current problem is that after the Soviet Union has fallen apart and broke up, we were left without budget financing and state patronage. Our success today is possible only when we join our efforts with Rossotrudnichestvo, External Relations Committee of our city of St. Petersburg, cultural institutions, universities, schools, and not least with foreign partners, diplomatic missions, and cultural centers of foreign countries. With such joint efforts, association makes a significant contribution to the cultural life of the city. There is no day without festivals, meetings, or cultural events. There were many events this year dedicated to Russia-UK Cross-Culture Year. There is never a quiet time for us. Today, the situation is rather tense in Ukraine, Syria, Iraq, and it is during such situations especially that the positive support of international community should be stronger. Governments alone cannot cope with today's global challenges, and they rely more and more on the power of public diplomacy, and we share this responsibility. Today, while discussing contemporary concerns and challenges of Russian-British cooperation, we look into the future and try to find a medium of intercourse and mutual understanding. It is not only the responsibility of our political leaders, but ours as well. Because they share this responsibility with us. The conference is an important event which gives us a chance to see not only differences in approaches to the international situation, but also similarity in perception of the changing world. We have to exchange ideas within the cross-culture dialogue, Russia and the United Kingdom, not forgetting about the culture of compromise.
And I thank you for inviting me here today, because there's two very important events coming up next year. January the 27th is the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army, and 9th of May, the 70th anniversary of Victory in Europe. Two very important events, so I think it's probably opportune that I'm here today. People say, why did the Soviet War Memorial come about? Well, in 1995, the 50th anniversary of Victory in Europe, the Russian embassy asked the SCR could they organise a religious service over graves of Red Army soldiers buried in this country. And it was left to me, because I was living near them in Wiltshire, to arrange this. And it was a great success. John Major, the then Prime Minister, sent me a message to read out. And following that, we decided that really there should be a monument in the capital to our wartime allies. I need not tell you that none of us would be sat in this room today if it wasn't for the Red Army. We'd be under Nazi domination. Let's make no mistake about that. And even Winston Churchill acknowledged that. So how did these Soviet soldiers end up buried in Great Britain? Well, as you know, Stalin, rightly or wrongly, did not sign up to the Geneva Convention. That meant that the Nazis could treat Soviet prisoners of war and other Soviet citizens as what they call Untermenschen, subhuman, and therefore they used them as slave labour. But when the British Army entered Western Germany, November 1944, they came across these slave labour camps, and these Soviet POWs were in a disgusting state, and some were so ill that they were flown straight back to military hospitals in Great Britain. Sadly, some of them never made it, and that's why they're buried in cemeteries, and their graves are looked after by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I understand this morning, before I got here, that the opening session, that the unveiling of the Soviet War Memorial was mentioned, so I won't cover that now. But I would just like to remind the audience that there was I've just come back from Jersey, and the Channel Islands were occupied by the Nazis, the only part of the United Kingdom that was. In there, over 400 Soviet prisoners of war were literally worked to death. And there is a slave workers memorial there, and on May the 9th each year there's a ceremony held there. A few years ago, I asked the Duke of Kent would he be interested in visiting Jersey on Liberation Day, and he said yes he would. So I arranged it with the bailiff of Jersey, and shortly after that I met him at an event in Dorchester. It was to commemorate the Women's Land Army, and I said to him, how did you get on in Jersey? Oh, he said, thank you so much for asking me to go there. He said, I learnt things there about the occupation that I never knew. And I think that goes for a lot of people in Great Britain, just not the Duke of Kent, but a lot of people don't realise what it was like to live in the Channel Islands under Nazi domination. Well, with regards to the Soviet War Memorial, it does represent all the countries of the former Soviet Union, and it is right too, because here today we're talking about international diplomacy, and therefore at the memorial most of the embassies turn up, along with the United States Embassy and sometimes the French Embassy. So it is a truly international day at the memorial. I would just like to pay a tribute to two people, Jean Turner, who done most of the work when this memorial was set up, and Vladimir Molchanov, who was a diplomat at the Russian embassy, first in Soviet times, and he stayed there 15 years, probably one of the longest diplomats staying at the Russian embassy, and as those two people together, they've done most of the work to get this monument erected. Jean, thank you very much indeed for what you did. And taking on from Jean is Ralph Gibson, who you know here today, and he's carrying on doing a first-class job. We have 3 events each year. Our own Remembrance Sunday, which is coming up shortly now in November. And sadly, I won't be there for the 2nd year as I'm Mayor of Wilton. I got to lead the town's remembrance. The 27th of January, which I've already mentioned, National Holocaust Day, and May the 9th was a traditional Remembrance Day for the republics of the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. I would also like to thank the support that we've had over the years from such people as the Arctic convoys. And I'm glad at last, after 70 years, the British government has recognised what Winston Churchill said was the worst journey in the world to Archangel in Murmansk. I think it's an absolute disgrace that these people, not all are dead now, have had to wait 70 years to get their British medal. The Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation has always honoured these people with medals starting back from, I think, the 40th anniversary of VE Day. And I would thank the Russian government, especially now they brought out the Yushkov medal, and I've been to one of these ceremonies in Wiltshire for the southwest of England. I think that's all I need to say, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep it short. If anybody wants to ask any questions, I think you want it kept short for that purpose, so I'm quite happy to answer any questions or any other panel. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm so excited about all the speakers, all the speeches we heard. The subject of the conference is extremely, extremely important, and I'm sure after today we all leave with new ideas of what we can do and what we can contribute to improving to the relationship between our countries. I must apologize, it is my total debut as a chair of the session, so I'm a bit nervous. Neither I learned English properly, and many years ago, looking at Margarita, many years ago, I, being in St. Petersburg, being a student at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, I was attending Italian classes, but not English classes.
We forgive you.
But it's wonderful to see Margarita and Tatiana, and they're doing fantastic job. I hugely admire what they do and contribute to the relationship and cultural exchanges between our countries. Thank you very much, Ralph, for inviting me today. What you personally do and your colleagues, it is amazing. And again, we've been cooperating in the past, and it's really fantastic that your organization has been doing what it has been doing for the last 90 years. Well, in spite of it is my total debut, I suppose there have been reasons for being invited to chair this session about cultural cooperation, because I'm director of Ensemble Productions, a company which has been organizing cultural events, Russian cultural events in this country for that many years. And in fact, the first big project which I've organized in this country was a festival which was dedicated to music from Russia and former Soviet republics, which took place in 1997 at the South Bank Center. It was extremely ambitious of me to come to the artistic director of the South Bank Center and present my ideas and my passion. And I will never forget her kindness and belief and trust in me that I will be able to find the money to stage this 2 weeks long festival. Roll Festival Hall, Queen Elizabeth Hall, Purcell Room, and actually we had some external exhibitions and a fantastic choir concert which took place at the Westminster Cathedral. I'm also the head of culture at the Russian-speaking council and responsible at the council for communications with governmental organizations, Russian and British. In the last 18 years, you can imagine, I managed to bring many wonderful artist groups from Russia. I wouldn't try to name them all. Most of them are very well established and fantastic musicians, singers, instrumentalists, ballet dancers. I've been working with many soloists of the Mariinsky and the Bolshoi and other Russian opera houses. All the visits by the Moscow soloists and the Moscow virtuosi ensembles led by Vladimir Spivakov and Yuri Bashmet, been exclusively brought and organized by Ensemble Productions. Some of you probably know our annual project, which has been happening for the last 7 years, Festival Maslenitsa, which is a total mixture of popular, traditional folklore and popular music, which happens year after year on Trafalgar Square. And in the last 2 years, it has been expanded from celebrations on Trafalgar Square to 1 big celebration of Maslenitsa, as Maslenitsa happens in Russia for the entire week. Then another annual project, which is called Russian Ballet Icons, with a fantastic cast of mainly Russian dancers who are soloists not only at the Bolshoi, Mariinsky, and other Russian opera houses, but they are well established and hugely admired artists who work around the world. And this project is supposed to show the greatness of the Russian ballet traditions, the greatness of the Russian ballet school. One of the speakers earlier on mentioned that we must do something about Russia not being known only for things like winter and vodka. Of course, Russian culture is the answer, and of course many British people know, love, and really know deeply know Russian ballet, music of Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, literature, of course, Chekhov, Dostoevsky, Pushkin. Some of you know that, just to prove another point, that my husband is Julian Gallant, who, we did meet, by the way, through the dating agency, which does not exist yet. But unfortunately, he sends his very best wishes, and he couldn't be here with us. But he is a good example of a British person who totally passionate about Russia, about Russian people. He traveled in Russia more than I ever did, I must say. He was the director of Pushkin House in Bloomsbury Square, and we're not talking about the previous Pushkin House. From its establishment until 2 years ago, he was the director, and he brought many exciting projects. Well, I think we have to, before I will start introducing our distinguished panel, I would like to mention, of course, the difficulties which we are all facing now. Unfortunately, culture and even all the positive cultural projects these days are politicized, and it is a pity. It is a pity, and of course the British media is contributing greatly to this. And we need to ask this question really: what we need to do about this? And of course, Diana brought some very, very important questions. So we have to work together. And I do agree that not only cultural projects will find all the answers. Of course, language, learning of the Russian language, human exchanges, they're extremely important. So business exchanges, and until very recently, as everyone knows, Britain was the biggest business investor in Russia. This could answer to of course many points. Very recently, I been heavily criticized. I would like to actually just to bring this point. I had to face huge criticism and, in fact, insults for my activities for promoting Russian culture and Russian entertainment, because obviously Russian culture cannot exist only from classical music and ballet. We do everything, and Festival Maslenitsa is a very good example of this. We do mass events because all these aspects there about Russia, about country, and about different types of culture which do exist in Russia. So I think we have to stay together, all the Russian supporters. We have to stay together. We should have more meetings and conferences like this, discuss problems, exchange our opinions, and try to convince people on normal levels, and of course people in both governments, that Russia and Britain should be friends, and because of all the history and everything what has been happening between our two countries in the last many years. And I do work closely with both governments, with the British and with the Russian. And I hope I can contribute in my capacity, my personal capacity, and capacity as a director of a company which has been actively organizing cultural events in Russia as well, just more in Britain. I can contribute as much as I can. Let's help each other in this possibly challenging task right now, but I believe it won't be forever, and if we believe in what we are doing and we believe in our friendship, things will start changing to better very soon.
Today, preparing for the conference, I examined the time schedule and found that culture is the very last point of the agenda. It's your point of view. Because really, very often at different conferences, culture is the last. Is it less important? But when we feel bad, even uncomfortable, we turn to poetry, we turn to music, we go to the theater or to the museum, and it really helps sometimes much more than medicine. Culture can be important, and even today we had different sections, and I think that measure of people who presented the speeches, to some or to other extent, they touched cultural problems, cultural questions, and certainly presenting the Hermitage, I think that culture is inevitable. Fortunately, the governments and the politicians also realize it. Public diplomacy extends beyond the formal diplomatic communication of a government to a foreign public. Formal government-public diplomacy campaigns often seek to capitalize on the counteract competing messages transmitted by their country's cultural industries.
Cultural elements play an important role in shaping how countries are perceived abroad. These activities can have a significant impact on international relations through cross-cultural communications. But certainly this year, when we celebrate the cross-cultural communication between Russia and Britain, and turning to the Hermitage Museum, you see, the links are really very strong, and my presentation somehow echoes with the presentation of Philip Birkenstein. And Philip, thank you once more for giving an idea how to put my idea into good English. I decided to quote Malevich. Not sure if it's absolutely true to his original. In original for the Russian speakers, искусство не имеет ни прошлого, ни будущего. Оно может быть только постоянно современным. Certainly, the Hermitage Museum and Britain, the Hermitage definitely, and Britain in general. Yesterday I told that those who was present at the opening of the photo exhibition that the museum people are very spoiled. The Hermitage are spoiled in a very separate way. We can't compete with the countries and the national cultures. Certainly these links were very strong and started when actually the museum was started. It officially happened 250 years ago in 1764 when Catherine the Great bought a large collection of West European painting. But in fact the British items came to our country and now are in the museum, and they did it even earlier, before the official foundation of the museum. And I hope that almost everybody who've been to the Hermitage saw that beautiful peacock clock made by a prominent British clockmaker, James Cox. Unfortunately, the technologies are not perfect, and I can't show you the video, but I do invite everybody on every Wednesday in the evening. That beautiful piece is put into operation thanks to our curator who restored it, so maybe a dozen of years ago, and the peacock clock is functioning even now, and I hope it shows our mutual time, both British and Russian. Further on, the only thing I wanted to mention especially about the peacock clock, because now it's a kind of national symbol, the symbol of national culture. We have a TV channel Culture, and all the programs are started with this presentation. A very important acquisition of the museum was the Walpole collection. We had a beautiful event the previous year when they traveled back to Britain, to the original place. It was Peter Paul Rubens, the drivers of the horses, and the Jesus Christ at Simon the Pharisee house, and the famous stalls by Snyder's, and one of the first Rembrandts, the Abraham Sacrifictions, and certainly Anthony van Dyck with his famous... Sorry? Wait, I'm sorry.
Back.
Yeah. You see, certainly all the art lovers and art historians as well, they like stories. And the story for the portrait of Charles I is that poor Van Dyck was so busy and so in a hurry that he presented both gloves on the head and by the leg They are both for the right hand. Certainly it happens so, but it's really one of the jobs of... The collection is rich, and maybe in my speech the words unique, the pearl, the gem will be overwhelming. But those who've been to the museum, I hope, will agree. And the others who have never been, I hope you'll appreciate it in the future. Certainly, Joshua, excuse me, I hope it will be the last. And certainly raiders, we would like to have more. But that time, the 18th century, was the flourishing period for the museum, when they could afford to buy not a single pieces, but the collections. And certainly our famous Wedgwood green frog set, who've been in the Hermitage long ago to come, because it has no equipment with a very, very good light. And certainly an important stage in the development of the links of Britain and the Hermitage collection and the Winter Palace, the royal residence, was the invitation of George Dole to Winter Palace to commemorate the glory of the Russian army in anti-Napoleon campaign. And in the course of a dozen of years, he presented the portraits of all generals, over 200 in number, and he was certainly assisted by two Russian artists, Polikov and Golicky. And this is the way the gallery...
I've learnt today, just from listening and being at the end of the conference, I just want to say that what I didn't know about was this soft power. And one of our great examples, I'm a soft, powerful person, because when we opened the library, I opened it with open cupboards with all the books on the shelves, like you would a domestic library. And all the people who saw me doing this building said, "What are you doing? You can't do that in Russia. You know, the books will disappear. You won't have any books in a week." And I thought, well, this is a library. Don't they know that, you know, if you take a book, you have to give it back? And they went, "Oh, no, you don't know that." Anyway, we still did this 20 years on. We've only actually ever lost 2 books. So, and not only that, and it was recognised by the Mayakovsky Library at our 20th anniversary party last weekend. Not only that, they have copied us. So they now have opened their vaults of closed cupboards and libraries and got rid of their Kartotek, which is the card index system. And the reader comes in and peruses the shelves, just like they do in the Galician library. So I'm rubbing my hands because that's soft power. I know it did change where we work. Everyone who hasn't visited the library makes assumptions about what we do. But also from today, I realise that without intention, we've covered quite a lot of these things. I'm sorry to boast. We're very small. We are not the Hermitage. But we do touch people, and we do achieve things, and we do create a platform for people to have a voice, to investigate, and to enlarge, enlighten, and expand their knowledge. Our main intention was to fill the gap. For those who don't know, we set up a library. The theme is Rossika. Rossika is a Russian word which means books about Russia published abroad. So that is our theme. It's very specific. We are Anglo-Russian. We don't have French or German books. Unfortunately, we haven't got space for that. We have a magnificent collection of Tamizdat, which we do have to use a card index for because there are so many essays between one soft cover publication that it would be too much for people to have it all out. And our themes that are most popular are travelogues, the Romanov family, obviously, Russia in emigration. As a library, we are an open book. You can meet the founders, myself, my mother. You can see our accounts. We're a registered charity, so you can go online, read our accounts, see how we spend the money or don't. You can participate, you can be in the audience, and we've grown from being a basis of books to a cultural centre to an institution in the city, and we've celebrated 20 years. I hope we go on for another 20 years. We've got to take a step into the future, so my future plan is to actually have it as a platform for Rossica of the 20th century, but online. So at the moment I'm looking at digitising and talking to publishers about using the already digitised books and having it on our catalogue. I'm going to talk you through the story of the library, just because I did do so much, but we've recently just had a very successful competition of translation of English poetry. I've been doing some poetry readings. We have an English language group who come every week and learn English. There's nobody else doing that in the city, I can say quite confidently now the British Council has closed. And I decided there wasn't enough poetry being introduced, and I read Ted Hughes, and I read the Liverpool poets, and I read Philip Larkin. And each time the group of English learners, people learning English, they had never heard of the poet I was talking about. And I was like, but they're really famous. They said, well, they haven't been translated into Russian. And we looked, and indeed, there's never been an anthology. There are random internet translations from Google Translate. So this year, as part of our 20th anniversary, we did our first poetry translation competition. I chose a poem by Philip Larkin that had never been translated into Russian at all. It was called Going, Going. It was very, everyone said, depressing. But actually, as you read it, you realise it's very, very important, because it's all about how England in 1972 was getting lost, and all we were being left with was cement, concrete jungles, supermarkets, screaming cafes, and broken tyres. I thought it was very relevant for Russian speakers to read, so gave it out on the internet. It became international. We had applicants from China, we had applicants from Boston, we had applicants from France, from Ireland, from England. We had applicants from Ukraine, from Belarus, the Baltic states. We had applicants from Yaroslav, from Kostroma, from a tiny village called Yaya, which I'd never heard of before. And each one applied, each one we judged with a very distinguished, well, not we, I was not on the jury, my Russian is not good enough. We had a very distinguished jury, of which Tatiana and Margarita, with their English speaking union hats, were participants of, and they all had to choose their top 10. In that top 10 was number 20. When we revealed who number 20 was, it turned out he was a well-known translator from Moscow, Alexei Kruglov. That was very exciting. It's the first time we've ever done this, and it was a really, really rewarding experience. I think we all benefited in every way. The second prize went to an amateur translator from Kostroma, a young English teacher. We invited all the applicants to the celebratory event, and I had a lovely moment where I had invited the dancer. For those of you who know, there's a dancer called Zander Parish who is at the Mariinsky Theatre, and he's actually from Hull, and Philip Larkin is from Hull. So I'd sent an invitation to Zander to the Mariinsky Theatre, yes, Hull, sorry, Hull, and said I didn't want to mimic someone, they might take offence. So I'd sent an invitation to the Mariinsky Theatre for Zander Parish, saying, please come to my Philip Larkin competition because of Hull. And he came, and one of the translators, who was a competitor, came, and she was from Yaroslav. She dragged her mother. She was 18 years old, and she had cerebral palsy. And suddenly I found myself at our beautiful library, which I really recommend anyone who hasn't been to see it, come and see it, pass judgment yourself, with this elegant boy from the Royal Ballet School who danced Mariinsky, and this girl from Yaroslav with cerebral palsy. And she said something so remarkable. She said something which I hope I never forget. It brings tears to my eyes. I said, this is Zander Parish. He dances at Mariinsky. And I said to Zander, this is Nadia Petrova. She's just translated the poem. And she went, oh, the world is full of people with so many different possibilities. I just thought,
Why have we never said that in England? That is a Russian girl from Yaroslav who presented exactly what we are all about. We all have different possibilities. I see there's no time to show my slideshow, but thanks to Russia, thanks to my family emigrating to England, I have had all these different possibilities, and we have had the possibility to open a library of Anglo-Russian culture in the mansion that belonged to my grandmother, where my grandmother grew up from there, and I think those who've been to Snowit, we existed for 20 years now. We will exist, I hope, for another 20 years. I don't think in anybody's imagination, when they left in 1920, did they think that their great-granddaughter, would set up something that now exists today. So soft power, unite, whatever. I think the Galician Library is just, I'm very happy to be here, to be an illustration of public diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very moving speech and for your valuable work.
And I will have to repeat something here, because, you know, it is the last session. I would like to start with these two quotations. There was a definite process by which one made people into friends, and that involved talking to them and listening to them for hours at a time. And the second one, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And I think that it is true about people, but it is also true about nations and about cultures. And we have, as we have seen today, public diplomacy has a lot of faces. And my story is of public diplomacy through non-governmental professional association of teachers, more specifically St. Petersburg English Language Teachers Association. To overview the activities of our organization and its mission, its cultural awareness of British and Russian cultures, let me first turn the clock 20 years back. In 1994, it was a special year in the relations of Britain and Russia, and it was special for St. Petersburg because in May, Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, visited St. Petersburg with a huge group of specialists and representatives of many spheres. And then in October, Queen Elizabeth II came to St. Petersburg and Moscow. You can see here some pictures of her and Prince Philip, although he is not very well seen, but in Peter and Paul's fortress. And about the Queen's visit, then Russian President Boris Yeltsin, spokesperson Vyacheslav Kostikov, said that we realized that the British Queen would have never visited a communist country, and they considered it, and in the press it was considered as a kind of official end of totalitarian era in Russia. Now our association was brought to life in the same year, in 1994, and it was first probably due to this changing climate in the world and in political and diplomatic relations, but also it was due to the fact that there were a lot of new universities appeared and a lot of new language courses. That is from one of the British websites, which is called Times Higher Education, and they reflect on 1992, and they have these words you can see here. Peter the Great's grand classical city of canals and waterways has a student population of over 250,000 and boasts 26 private universities compared to the state's 44. Along with independent universities, and the development of old universities. Hand in hand with them, new libraries appeared and old ones started new programs. And here I have a passage about Golitsyn Library, but I will, well, actually not speak about it now. The only thing is that it is also celebrating 20 years this year, and that it is in the famous Karlov House together with Mayakovsky Library, who is changing practices. But Katya Golitsyn has said a lot, and much more beautiful maybe than I do. That's why I will skip it. And our motto was that we are linking, supporting and developing teachers both in St. Petersburg and beyond. Now I would like to remember one story from a conference which I attended here in Britain, a conference of International Associations of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. Rod Balaiter, who actually taught at Norwich at that time, and he is a prominent British scholar in methodology in the field of teaching English. He remembered that when he first came to Russia, and he met with English language teachers, one of them came to him and started crying because of the emotions and explained that it was the first real British person she has ever seen, although she had been teaching English for over 20 years. Now I joined this association a bit later, and I just would like to read a little passage, I think very emotional, from one of my colleagues who was there from the very beginning. Spelter birthday was in 1994, and the first conference was organized in the Academy of Sciences building in April. It was the event. Even the air seemed to be throbbing with excitement. Hundreds of English teachers from schools and universities all over the city came to listen to British and American methodologists who were to speak there. For most, it was the first time they had seen one. Plenty of teachers enthusiastically talked to each other in English for practice. And there was an Oxford University Press book exhibition and sale in the hall. The first ever. It was a new world. It was the world that now we take for granted. And in a way, maybe it explains that, you know, in a way there are now maybe less than thousands and hundreds of teachers coming to our events, because a lot take it for granted. Although the interest never exists. And here I would like to say that in 1994, the British Council office was opened in St. Petersburg, and I think it's when Jan came, no, maybe later. But actually I met with Jan in the British Council office, and the first director, Michael Bird, supported the association and actually helped to establish the links with International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language, which is based in the UK. He sponsored at that time, first in history, a whole delegation of teachers who were representing Russian teachers. Now, I think that probably I would like to say that we are still members of this association, as well as we are members of English-speaking union, and along with 90 representatives of 90 other countries. In 1999, we introduced a website, and everything we have been doing for these 20 years has always been connected with sharing the best teaching practices of Russia, the United Kingdom, United States and other countries, as well as providing information on their countries and culture. Originally, when the Iron Curtain fell, the chance of visiting other countries as well as contacting counterparts internationally was enormous interest, and it became a reality.